Hello. One second. My name is Kristen Rogers. I'm the chair of the Harwood Unified Union School District. Thank you for joining us. We start each meeting with public comment. Anyone from the public can speak on a school-related matter they would like to. Each speaker is given up to 3 minutes. Usually, we are able to hear from everyone that would like to speak. If for some reason there are more speakers than time allows, I will draw names. At the 2.5-minute mark, I will let you know you have 30 seconds left. And at the 3-minute mark, I will let you know that your time is up so we can go on to the next speaker. If you have more to share with us than 3 minutes allows, we invite you to email the entire board at cen-huusdboard@huusd.org. Please know that while the board does not respond during public comment, we do always listen carefully to what is being said. If you are on Zoom and would like to speak, please click on the raised hand button now, and we'll give it just a minute or two. Peter, I see your name, so I'm going to go ahead and let's see. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep.
Okay, let me just 1 second. Sorry, it's almost together here. And you can go ahead when you're ready.
Great, sure. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I do so to encourage you as a board to pick up the last action item on your agenda and to encourage you to be and continue to be serious and vigilant about the transmission of COVID-19 in our community and the health risks that it poses still. I do understand the impetus to stop talking about COVID, but ignoring a pandemic before it's over is, as history has shown us, not wise. And even though the president declared the pandemic over last month, as one senior researcher at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security put it, talk like that is counterproductive. And I quote him, "By pandemic, most people mean that people around the world are susceptible to an infectious disease for which people do not have immunity and therefore could cause serious illness. It is absolutely true that the pandemic is much less severe than it was. But the fact is," he continues, "we still have 65,000 new reported cases every day and 450 deaths a day, which annualizes 170,000 deaths a year. So it's not over." I'm the pastor of the Waterbury Congregational Church, and unlike school, of course, attendance at church is voluntary. For the first 2 years of COVID, like almost every other institution, we operated remotely, but we have been worshiping in person since spring with an option for people to watch the service online, but attendance in person is less than half of what it was pre-pandemic. And this, despite the fact that we're paying close attention to the data and to mitigation efforts. We've instituted policies guiding what kind of worship services we can hold and what we can do based on the CDC weekly assessment of community spread, which takes into consideration all sorts of variables and is, as far as we can tell, the only real regular, weekly, and scientific way of determining risk. We are also in the process of improving our indoor air quality. I won't bore you with the statistics about the dangers of COVID and what it still poses. You know that. In fact, there are all sorts of variables making this pretty complicated, but it is fair to say serious health dangers still exist and disruptions to families and work life are considerable. What I can say with confidence,
That's 30 seconds left.
Yep, is that I've chatted with many of my parishioners who have not yet returned, and almost universally, it is because they do not yet feel free to take that chance. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the best in your work.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Jonathan Young, I believe board member Jonathan Young, correct? If you want to just put your hand up if that's correct. I see you under the attendees. I can move you over to panelist if that's you. Yeah, okay, I'm going to move you over. Just 1 second here. Let's see, I'm not seeing anybody else for public comment. Public comment? Just double checking. Okay. So we will move on to our agenda. So I do have, I'd like to amend the agenda for one item. I'd like to, from the consent agenda, for the, it's the approve the nurse leader job description and move it over to a separate action item. If I could get a motion for that.
I move we approve the agenda as suggested.
Is there a second? Okay. Is there any objection to that amendment? Not hearing any or seeing any, that will pass. So we will approve the agenda with that new act with the nurse leadership or the nurse, sorry guys. The nurse leader job description under the action item. Is there any, is there a motion to approve the agenda with that, Lisa? Second? Okay, any discussion? Any, sorry. Sorry, guys. So all the in favor of, I'm sorry, my brain is, I'm sorry. Yes, any objection to approving the agenda? Sorry, I'm off my game. It's been like a month since we actually had a board meeting, so I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, guys. Okay, so we have next, we're going to have highlights. So the first one is we had really exciting things happen at Crosset Brook and at the high school. So we had a couple of really incredible visitors. We are 2 for 2 for our state senators who came to visit. So we had Senator Leahy, who visited us early October and had lunch because he was a huge advocate for the farm to school program. And Mike, if you want to jump in at any point, you absolutely feel free to do that. He joined us for lunch. The food was super great. He sat with the kids. Then what I thought was the coolest thing is kids lined up to get his autograph. And I just thought that was really, really, really great. That was awesome. Then upstairs, there was a whole bunch of presentations, and Jeswin, who's part of the, what, Mike, what group is, I forget what that group.
It's the Farm to School Club.
They did a presentation as well. And then they, on the lower picture, he went outside near the chickens and did this, they had he said some words, and then the couple, one of the representatives from the group did, and they gave him a gift basket, and in it was a Batman tie. So that's what you have right there. So it was really awesome for him to come to the school. I was able to go as well and see it. I thought that was really awesome. And then our second visitor was Bernie Sanders, and Mike can talk a little bit more about that.
Senator Sanders' office reached out to the high school and asked to visit the school, and they brought with them the ambassador from Finland, which was an awesome opportunity. Spent nearly an hour in the auditorium with our students conducting a town hall. Our students were fabulous, asked very intelligent, exceptional questions. And one of them asked why they chose Harwood. And I think it was, it speaks highly of the school. He said that the school has a reputation for outreach and teaching our students about the importance of international relationships and encouraging exploration of other countries and other cultures. And that's why he chose us, along with the fact that he had to get the ambassador to Burlington. And this was a little more of a closer region than going to Southern Vermont, but it was just a phenomenal experience. He also spent time talking to students, and as he is quite the folk legend, the hallways, as he was leaving, when he arrived, all the students were already in the auditorium. As he was leaving, the hallways were lined with our students yelling, "We love you, Bernie," and just giving overall love to our guests. So we appreciated both visits. I think when Kristen showed the picture, you can see on the outside, Senator Leahy, his car in the background. He just stayed and stayed and stayed. Finally, his staff pulled the car up to try to give him the clue that he needed to leave, but he still continued to stay as long as students came up and talked to him. So both were really good experiences for our students and great exposure, and speak highly of programs in our school district and the esteem that our schools have built in the state.
Yeah, it was pretty. So we're 2 for 2. I mean, it's election year, so maybe we could get Peter Welch to come too. I mean, that would be 3 for 3. Okay, so we're going to move on. If nobody has any questions, we'll move on to board reports. And this first one we have is the superintendent report. Take it away.
I did a copy of my monthly report, and I believe we decided under there is a review of the survey evaluation goals retreat presentation. I think, Kristen, we decided that that would be part of the discussion superintendent goals. So I just have a shortened version of what I presented at the public retreat, but we continue to move along. This Friday is the end of the first quarter. And I spent the day today. I was invited with some teachers and some students to attend the Roland Foundation Conference in Burlington. Our school has been very successful in the years of receiving Roland Foundation Fellows among our teachers. So today was a day to reflect. There was a presentation on a lot of the equity and anti-racism type focuses for the presentation. But I also had a chance to talk to our students, and they said this is a particularly challenging time because a lot of exams are taking place this week, and a lot of work is in progress. So we are into the heart of the school year, and very pleased with that. I would also point out, as your new superintendent and your new superintendent to Vermont, yesterday was another first for me. We had a call from the principal at Brookside who told me they needed to evacuate the playground because of an intruder. A moose had wandered onto the playground. So there's never a dull moment in the superintendency in our schools. Unusual for Waterbury in that section.
Does anybody have any questions for him? Just want to make sure it's okay. Okay. So Lisa, Director of Finance. Oh, yeah. Did you have any questions about his report? Sorry. Hold on, Lisa. You got to use your microphone.
I will take questions about the moose, although I have limited knowledge or anything else in my report, and I'd prefer that.
Anybody have questions about the moose? Because I'm just going to switch topics. So I noticed the paragraphs about COVID in the superintendent report. I had a couple of questions about it. It mentions that cases, quote, slowed significantly. And I'm wondering what that means. Slowed significantly compared to what? And also it mentions reported cases, and I'm wondering what a reported case is.
Okay, it slows significantly compared to previous months. I did make an exception for Harwood. And I would have a comment that I had a meeting yesterday as a result of the number we had at Harwood, and we continue to have regular conversations with our health professionals in our schools. And I think it's worthy to note that I think not just in this school, but in schools throughout the country, at least my last school, our high school nurse pointed out that we do not see cases of in-school spread. Most cases we're seeing are cases that she's able to surmise are cases that have been contracted outside of school. So we're not seeing those in-school spread. As far as the relevance for, or the number, the reduced numbers, I can give you an example of Moortown. That's the one that's coming to mind. The nurse reported 2 cases in October, 1 student case, 1 teacher case, and in previous months she saw higher numbers.
And could you explain what it means to be a reported case?
It means that either a parent calls and says, my child is home with COVID, or somebody comes to school and is symptomatic, and the nurse, with parent permission, administers a COVID test, and it's positive.
Okay, because I noticed that the form that people fill out doesn't ask. So they would have to call directly and say, hey, I want to let you know specifically that my kid has COVID.
Correct.
I also noticed that it said there were 10 cases at Harwood, and that was reported to the state. I noticed in your Q&A yesterday, you mentioned that was classified as an outbreak. And so I'm just wondering, did that trigger any actions at all? from us.
Right. Under state guidance from the Department of Health, it's considered an outbreak, so we need to report that. And again, those cases, the terminology can be confusing because it was not an outbreak of spread throughout our school. It was a case of students who are reported with COVID, and that number then is sent to the Department of Health. They guide our action like they do with any infectious disease. We operate under the jurisdiction of the Department of Health. And at this point, they instructed us to send a letter home to families.
And did that play into consideration of having an all-school assembly on Thursday, do you know? Was that taken into consideration that there was an outbreak reported a couple of days earlier?
It was Thursday when we started receiving numbers, Thursday and Friday.
Oh, okay. So that was after the all-school assembly?
It's concurrent with the all-school assembly.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
That was at Harwood, the entire Harwood school was at the assembly?
Yes.
We've seen an uptick in cases since the assembly.
I've seen an uptick in cases since the assembly.
Any other questions? Anybody on Zoom with questions? You can also just yell at me if I miss your hand too. That's totally cool. Okay, so we'll move on to the Director of Finance, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. Got a froggy voice, so I'm homesick. So I gave a Q1 report, financial report, compared to
You're muted, Lisa.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did a Q1 report. I did actuals, at budget actuals versus this year for last year. So you'll see we're tracking slightly behind in the revenues as of Q1, but we have received quite a bit of revenues. They've come in a little late from towns, but they're coming in and that'll be reflected in my Q2 report. It's a little early to really do comparison. I just really wanted to share with you what our total categories and our expenses are, and look over and do a comparison year over year from fiscal 22 to fiscal where we are in fiscal year 23. I also included an executive summary of all of our other funds, special funds, reserve, maintenance reserve. I do want to point out at the retreat, I had mentioned we had 3.5 million. We actually have closer to 4.1 million. In Q1, we did not transfer the 1.5 million, and you'll see that on my report for the maintenance reserve that needs to be transferred in, and that happened in Q2. So you'll see it reflective in Q2. So for in the maintenance reserve, we have 1.4 million once we do that transfer. I also included a budget timeline. It's still too early. We're collecting a lot of assumptions for fiscal year 24. However, we are hearing increases in health benefits are going to be going up significantly. They're preliminary numbers I've put in, but I'm trying to get all the numbers, and they probably won't come in until mid-November. We'll have all of that as we go through. I guess I don't want to continue with my froggy voice. Does anybody have any questions? And we'll talk about the Waitsfield kitchen when it comes up on the agenda.
Anybody have any questions on this part? No, we don't have any questions for you, Lisa.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we are moving right along to discussion items. So the first one is superintendent goals. And as you notice in the leadership report, the goal is to approve the goals at the next meeting. So this is the time to ask questions, suggestions. This is the time.
I was just hoping for the benefit of the public just to go through a very shortened slide presentation from what I had discussed earlier. We talked about the fact that Some of this is a review of some activities since I've been here, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the entry survey, which was conducted over the summer and has informed a lot of the decision-making, along with my observations in schools from the first 9 weeks of school. We had 660 responses from the community, and we can categorize that in 4 general areas. And what I had shared with the board at the retreat 2 weeks ago is there were some places where people listed multiple categories. I'm a community member and I have a child at Waitsfield Elementary School, and I'm also a teacher, or any combination thereof. But we had good participation among various groups, including I opened the survey to our Harwood Union High School students. We had 100 students participate, which is also a very good percentage, 20-25%. And it was open-ended. So I asked general questions of what were the strengths of the school district, what are the needs of the school district, and then just for general comments. And I read through all 660 responses, which were very helpful, and also reinforced a lot of the conversations I've had with community members since the beginning of my arrival in July. And then for the strengths and needs, I created categories reflective of the responses I received. Again, this is global response. There were details I could certainly go through and discuss some of the details of what I saw and give examples of them. But for the most part, for strengths categories, I had 5 general categories: caring teachers and staff, a strong community, student opportunities. Examples would be classes at our different schools, particularly at Harwood. Most of the students who responded were high school students in that category. School pride, various pride in the different schools within our school district, and then great students. And you can see the number responding to each. I think it speaks highly when we have a business education of working with students that's highly people-centered, highly personnel. When we look at the percentage of our budget for personnel, it's somewhere around 70%. That such a large percentage of our community said that we have an exceptional faculty and staff. That speaks highly of the work we do and the relationships we form. Strong community. You can see the order there of comments. Within the needs categories, school climate, and school climate can be anything from we need to recognize the individual needs of all of our students in a better way, to issues from last year, a lot of discussion last year of vaping in the bathrooms, vandalism, different concerns with an assault from last year. So they were the areas noted, along with just improving our overall feeling of belonging in buildings. Facility needs, school consolidation, pro and con, finances, enrollment concerns, wage benefits, and COVID-19 in the general areas for needs from our community, from parents, teachers, students, was for school climate and academics. So when we look at those strengths within categories, the different groups who responded, our students pointed out that student opportunities are something they appreciate in our schools. And then the other categories, parents, faculty, staff, and our community, pointed to our outstanding faculty and staff. Under the needs, students talked about school climate, parents and community talked about academics. Community talked about it was an exact tie for school climate. And then our faculty and staff also pointed out school climate. So I tried to take that information, what I've observed since the beginning of the year. And I will say, and I made this comment at the board retreat, as I've talked to students, I've talked to faculty and staff in the schools, particularly at Harwood, they are sensing a very different environment this year for many reasons. Most attribute the fact to a lot of the mitigation we had to do, the challenges of living through COVID, that there is a positive environment, that students are able to focus more on classes, teachers are able to focus more on learning and academics, and that there has been a decline of some of those concerns in the area of school climate. It doesn't say that we have to negate those comments. I think they're still very relevant in many areas. So the data that I received from the survey, along with my own observations and conversations, have fed into, influenced the goals that I have proposed. And the draft goals would be to focus on academics, taking a look at our needs in a proactive multi-year response plan to focus on retaining students, making sure that students who start in the district to the best of our ability have a need and a desire to stay in our district, look at academic programming, and also looking at school climate. And this would be a report I would plan, a plan I would prepare, have regular discussions with the board, also involve our faculty, our staff, our administration. A lot of the work is already underway. And I think it's important to note too, that in the area of academics, I had a conversation this morning with our department heads who are also feeling the need to make some changes and also some refinements as well to some of the programming that we offer to our students. Budget, this is one that would be primarily with Lisa, but we feel that we need to give the board a long-term outlook of when you're looking at a 3-year budget plan. There are a lot of assumptions both on the revenue side and the expenditure side, but we feel that that's a good conversation and something that would be of benefit to the board and our entire district. Community relations, I see tremendous work going on in our schools, and I think our principals do an exceptional job of sharing that news with their particular school communities. During COVID, we shared a lot of, the district shared a lot of information, particular to COVID, through district-wide communications, but that was very targeted, and I believe it's important for myself, our central office, to share in a more intentional way across our school district or our community the good things going on in all of our schools, so that parents from Brookside understand what's going on in Warren, and community members who don't have children in schools can see that the tax dollars they're contributing to our schools are going to exceptional programming and success for many of our students. And finally, facilities. There's been a lot of talk about Harwood Union High School, the needs here, the infrastructure. While the school district and the board have approved a number of capital improvement plans, Ray Daigle, who's here, has done a lot of work on some piecemeal projects, necessary projects such as the roof. We know that it is more cost effective to bid projects as a package. So my recommendation would be to start having discussions with the board on an intentional way of looking at the plans we have, the needed revisions, soliciting input from our community, and then at some point when the board deems it appropriate, going out for a bond. So that they are the 4 goals that I proposed, and I would be happy to have further discussion.
Okay. Discussion, thoughts, feedback. Do people like the goals? Is there tweaking that people want to see to the goals? I did include them in, yes, go ahead, Lisa.
In general, I think they're great goals. I think they're specific enough without being too specific that there's some leeway in there as far as kind of what direction they take once you get into the, I think, as goals go, there's that research part first, right? Or you're gonna have to look at, what does school, like my question, I guess, would be like, who does get to define like academic success, for instance, in the first goal, or how do we define that, I should say. And so I think, it's good that they're broad, but then there has to be some definition that happens in that process. And I'm wondering how that process goes.
I would first start with our administrative team and work with them, but also involve not just faculty, but also students. What I like to do is to develop, and we have somewhat of a truncated process this year just because we're starting the goals essentially in November. We have till June for those goals. So that's why I emphasize developing plans and processes. But I think that's a great question. It's a question I discussed with our department chairs this morning. What is success, and how does this district define this success? I do like to then present those discussions, those updates on a quarterly basis to get board input, because I think it's something that we all need to have discussions with. So it would be an ongoing discussion among multiple groups. And by the end of the year, we would hope to have some definitive plans as to what that looks like in a work group process, and have input from multiple groups of stakeholders.
Jonathan, do you want to go ahead? Jonathan, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
How's that?
Perfect.
Sorry about that. Mike, I just wondered if there were any plans for follow-up surveys that might dive a little deeper into what climate issues are present in the school, and whether we were planning on asking the student body something more, more probing to find out what those climate issues would be in their mind, and then also ask the staff. And I don't know if you would need to ask the community, but what are we doing to kind of find out about those climate issues that seem to have popped up?
Great question. I appreciate that.
Had some issues when I turned that off. I think I would say there are a couple of ways we would do that. First, we did the district administered last year a climate survey from the National School Climate Center that went to students, parents, other groups. While the participation rates were not what we would like to see, that does give us a starting point. I think as well, I would want to enlist the support of our students. There have been community-wide conversations, school-wide conversations. I think we can do is take some of that information, look at areas where we may see that there are some needs, and then conduct some focus groups with the help of our students and our faculty to dig a little deeper and define what they are, what was unique to last year, and what they're seeing this year, and what they would desire that community to be. I do know a lot of those conversations on a more global scale have been in process. Our high school principals have a core team, a leadership team that has been working on a regular basis. So I think a lot of that work is underway, but there's some refinement that I think we could take a look at and would want to include as part of that plan.
Before I go to you, Lisa, are there other people at this moment who have more time to think? Go ahead, Leif.
I like the goals generally. I'm wondering about the academic one, and I don't know if you put it first because of priority, but I think it's pretty important. And so I'm just looking at the wording, and I'm seeing like the last part says focused on student retention, improving academic success, and improving school climate. And as the questions have noticed, like we got to kind of define those areas, each of them a little bit more probably. My first thought is that we should add one around equity. I think that'd be really important. That's in our vision statement. We've talked about doing professional development as a board around anti-racist education. So whatever makes sense to you and your staff. But I also just wonder about the part where it says research current district needs. And then it kind of says, and we're going to focus on these areas. I'm just wondering how we build in leeway so that if you're doing the research and you're like, oh, wow, this is a huge area, that's reflected in this general goal, just to make it as responsive as possible. And the other piece of that I'll just mention is, our vision statement as a board, we have some buzzwords in there, right, around student-centered and equities in there and these other things. And so I'm still confused, like, is the board gonna define those better for you? Or could part of your goal for this year would be to help us, you and the other professionals involved, say, well, this is how we're interpreting that vision statement, and kind of bring it to the next levels of grain size to say, like, we think that this is what you're saying is our vision. Here's, that's what would show up in the plan. I personally think that would be the best way to do it, because the board doesn't necessarily have the time to do all the learning we need for that. But if you and your staff could educate us, here's what your vision statement looks like on the ground, and then have some back and forth, that'd be great.
It's a great idea. And I would also say our state, on the first part in equity, and I look to the board for discussion on that, educational quality standards deal with issues of equity, social justice. I attended a session today on that, and I do think that would be a worthy enhancement to the goal. I think that was that would have been assumed, but I think being explicit about that is an excellent idea. But I would look to the board to see if additional board members felt that that was a good addition, and I'd be glad to add that as a focus area. But in answer to your second question, yes, I would want to bring back some of our thoughts, and we would certainly take a look at the board's goals and try to take a look at the interface between the two and kind of discuss where there could be enhancements to what we both have had and where we could have some additional focus.
Marlena, you had your hand up. You can go ahead.
Yeah, just to answer Michael's question, I agree. It definitely should be something that should be added, and it'd be great if it was something that was a given. But the reason why it's been brought up these past couple of years is because it's not something that's assumed or a given. So it's definitely something that should be featured, just like the other goals.
Curtis, is there any way to make that more clear on the speaker or not really? Okay. So, yes, go ahead. I was just going to say, so the word equity has been brought up. And so is that something that we want him to add to the goal in the academic part? Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Is that like a motion that we should be making so that we can discuss, or is that an informal thing?
I think this is just informal. We're discussing it. It's kind of like, I kind of look it back, like, remember when we did the flag policy, we kind of discussed it. We had recommendations or whatever, we took it back and then finally came back and voted on it. Do you remember that process? So we kind of discussed the whole thing, got feedback, and then I'm gonna call it last board season, we went and we worked on it and then brought it back. So I think that would be the kind of thing that we would be, that's my interpretation. Is that anybody else's interpretation? I don't want to assume anything if people don't think that that's, yeah, okay.
That would be the process I'd recommend too, that their superintendent goals. I want to have that interface that the board reviews and approves of those goals so that we're having conversations among faculty, administration, board. So my intent would be I have the goals in front of me to bring back goals that are finalized for adoption at the next meeting.
Cindy, did you? And then,
yeah, that was pretty much what I was going to say. I think that these goals seem general, as you said, they were general to begin with. It looks like you broke out all the stuff you've gleaned in the past 4 months or whatever, and developed a set of goals that you thought fit what was out there. And then we've mentioned that probably there would need to be some specific, that you need to break them out a little bit. So we have some, otherwise there's nothing to measure any kind of evaluation or any kind of evaluation of how we've all done towards these goals, not even just superintendent evaluation. So I think any comments that we have to add, that I'm hopeful that you'll incorporate them or not. And if yes, great. And if not, why you didn't think that it fit, and then we can talk about it further. But I just think a little more specificity will come out of these kinds of discussions, is my suspicion.
Yes, and then the next phase after the board would adopt the goals, I would develop milestones, quarterly milestones that would share that, in the month of January, I'm going to update the board, and this is how far I plan to be on each of the 4 goals, and do that. It's going to be somewhat of a truncated quarterly process just because of the timing.
Yeah.
Before I do second round of people, I'm sorry, I know Ashley or Mike, did you want to?
Sure, I'll say.
Don't
something.
fight over it.
I just want to say, these are great goals. It's your first year. I think no matter what you're doing, your first year is always, I don't want to say the toughest, but maybe the most interesting. So far, every time I've talked to you or we get correspondence, you say a first for you. So, I don't think that, I guess what I'm saying is your first year is always, your learning year. And so we may not know, to Cindy's point, until next year. And we may learn stuff from you. So I think for a first time coming in here and setting these goals and getting going, I think these are good. Certainly we can add words and points and stuff like that, but I think just learning about Vermont and the area is a lot of it too. So
Ashley, did you want to go? Okay.
I just, back to the equity part. Equity wouldn't just be across the academic part, it would be in the climate piece as well, right? That's more of a general covering a lot of things. And then my other question, or just a point, would be, I was so impressed when Maisie and Jeswyn came back and talked about the Harkness that they did at Harwood. That was the conversation that the kids were having about the episode last year in the bathroom. And that was kind of, we got a great piece of feedback, everything, we learned a ton. So maybe a really, a Harwood way to see where we're at in the climate would be to do another Harkness and have all those school groups meet and have that conversation again to get like a temperature on where the high school's at now.
Yeah, thank you.
Lisa, now go.
So sorry. So I just don't think I got my first question answered quite how, maybe I didn't pose it correctly in order to get it answered. My question is, when within the process are we going to know what we're measuring for academic success and improving school climate, so that when we're looking at it on a quarterly basis, we know what data we're looking at?
That would be really in the first quarter that we would define that as a milestone to come back to the board with some of the initial reactions and the initial ideas that we have as a team on that. So I would say probably in the January timeframe, February timeframe.
Marlena, did you have your hand up again? I just want to make sure.
Yes, I do. So a couple things. One, I really want to stress the point that as we've been talking about these other goals, they've all been described as goals. When equity has just come up, it's been described as the word equity. And I've heard that said several times. Equity is not just a word, it's a form of it's an action that needs to be taken, and it also should be recognized as a goal. And I don't think this is similar to the flag policy, because we're talking about goals, and this is policy. And that was policy. So I don't think it should be approached the same way, but I feel like the same thing is happening in this conversation, where something that should be addressed more immediately and come back around with more detailed outline, like Michael mentioned about the other goals, that be it that one in addition in the agenda, it says that these goals will be discussed and actions might be taken on them. I don't know the exact language. And be it that Michael mentioned that it is assumed within the goals, I don't see why we need to wait on pulling it out as a clear goal and coming back with milestones just like the other goals.
So the plan would be, is that we're discussing it now, and then he would come back with the final goals for next week for us to vote on. Is that what you were wondering about, Marlena?
No, I'm not wondering about that. I heard the goals will be brought back and be more clearly spelled out, and also have milestones, the current goals that are there. What I feel like, if I'm hearing correctly, that equity won't be added as a goal until we discuss it and vote, etc. But at the same time, I'm hearing Michael say that it's a goal that was assumed within there. So why not just make it clear now?
My plan is to add that as part of that first goal, equitable practices, and take a look at ways we can break that out. I think that's a multifaceted goal. I think it is, there will probably be follow-up beyond this year related to equity, anti-racism, and some of our work that we're doing. We also have a school committee chaired by two of our principals that has started up this year as well. So I think there's going to be additional discussions we have that are outside of the goal.
It makes me wonder, looking at that goal that's titled academics. I appreciate, Mike, it sounds like plan to add equity as part of that goal, which I agree with. I'd be interested to hear whether Marlena thinks that that's sufficient, or if Marlena, you were suggesting that equity is its own separate goal or fifth goal. But I'm also thinking what we heard from Ashley about school climate here, and it seems like this goal is more than academics, I guess is what I want to say, because retention also could very well, people could be leaving or attracted to our district for reasons that have nothing to do with, what might be termed academics or academic success. So in addition to adding it, I wonder if there's a different phrase, or maybe equity shows up in the title, or something that kind of encompasses that it's not just what most people think of as academics.
And I think all those areas are heavy lifts, and what my emphasis this year is creating a plan, a blueprint, so to speak, on how we want this to look, because it's really, in addition, there's some short-term objectives, but there's some long-term needs, I believe, that this plan will help define. And just speaking from some of my own thoughts, equity, I believe, is something we should focus on as a district, even outside of this goal. But one of the things I would want to talk to the board as we get into the next year, and we've had some discussions about reviewing the board policy in a comprehensive way. A lot of districts have adopted a standalone equity policy that guides a lot of that work. And I think one of the recommendations that, just thinking of this today, earlier today, especially with the Roland Foundation conference and some of the sessions I attended, is I think that's something that would be worthy of breaking out as a separate action plan for the board to consider in the coming year.
Can I ask a clarifying question of that? So are you saying that maybe equity isn't as a separate goal?
I think it's embedded, because when you look at our educational quality standards, we want to look at our academic goals and our academic programming through that equity lens, but I think there's additional work that needs to be done in that area. So I would say both.
Yeah, I think that equity, again, could be just put through all the different, many of the different goals. And I would encourage us to not get too hung up on some of the specific language, because I think with 14 people, we're going to spend a lot of time parsing grammar and content. And I think we might also want to differentiate between board goals for ourselves as a board and superintendent goals for the work that we want our superintendent doing. And I think that these goals are very appropriate to the feedback that you got from the survey. And I think, given the fairly robust response, that, they're on target.
Any other feedback? I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay, so Mike, you feel good with coming back with next week? And not next week, in 2 weeks, not next week.
2 weeks, but absolutely, I think this feedback's helpful, and it's a very robust discussion. I'm appreciative of the board for the focus we have on academic programming, and I look forward to additional conversations along this nature.
I had one other thing. I'm sorry. The communication relations goal, we talked about this at the retreat a little bit. I would love to see that expanded to community engagement. It feels very kind of like one-way traffic right now. I don't know what communications relations means, but in the words of the goal, communication plan, how to improve communication. So I would love it for it to think about, like, how do we engage the community to, get continual input, and not just like awareness of accomplishments and challenges, but like helping the community understand what we're about. So for example, once the plan is put together, or even as part of that process for the academic part, engaging the community in that, and then, eventually like, hey, this is what our plan is. Here's what the blueprint is. Here's what proficiency-based learning is, that kind of stuff.
Intention for this goal is to focus first internally. I think we need to develop some internal processes. I think community awareness, community input, community outreach is an essential element of that, but I think it's important to have that internal plan first. I plan to, with the board's blessing, I hope to be around for a long time, and I think that would be a worthy second-year goal, but I am also mindful of over-promising and under-delivering on the goals for this year.
Okay. So we're going to move on to, we put staff appreciation back on the agenda because we felt like when we left, we didn't really have a cohesive idea of what we were doing. So in our leadership report, Kelly and I recommended food for the people. I know that there had been other ideas that had been thrown out. And Kelly and I would like to be the point people for this if nobody has a strong desire to do that. Is everybody good with food? I mean, I know I appreciate food when people bring it to the hospital for us. So we're good. Ashley, you go right ahead.
It came out to $5 per person, right? So you could do something good in the food world. I'm not sure what else we could really do with that. So, yeah.
Are people cool if Kelly and I are like the point people? Okay. There are cards to sign before people leave. Please, if possible. Sure. Can you go right ahead? Okay. So moving on. That was great. Okay. So professional development for the school board. In your leadership report, there was a link to a VSBA YouTube video on budget overview. So what did people think about that? And this is an open discussion, so it's everybody can talk about it, give their input, questions, go. Who's up? Who's got one? Anybody? Was it good? Was it informational for people who have never been on the school board before? What? No, in their leadership report, there was a link for a budget overview video. Any thoughts? Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, as I eat an M&M. I mean, they're dry. They're not thrilling to watch. But for somebody that's been through the process a few times, I thought it was still a really good overview to kind of prime your brain towards what we're going to be heading into. It's so complicated, and even in an hour-long webinar, they basically just introduce it. I was going to mention that we have some good resources from the past. I think it was Michelle Baker's report or some sort of presentation she gave to the board last year that we should probably dig up and circulate around, because I remember that being really helpful to break down some of the terms that are pretty foreign to most of us.
I could dig around for that.
Awesome. And then Tari actually did a really wonderful job. I think it was last year, in one of our communications to the community, that really broke down what the decisions that we make as a board and how that actually affects taxpayers. So I think that would be helpful to use again as a template.
I can poke around and see what I can find if everybody likes that, and then I can just send it out. Okay. It's a good refresher too. Any other comments or feedback? I know I was listening to it and I was like, especially with a blurry background is, and anybody in Zoom land had any feedback, questions? They feel like it gave a good overview if you were able to watch it. I know the board packet didn't come out till Monday, so I apologize for that. But if you did not get a chance to watch it, it'd be a good just refresher, or for the new people, it would be a good idea to just watch it. It gives a very general overview. Any other comments on that? I know it was, no? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Christine.
I was just going to say that if people go onto the business page of the website, I think if some of Michelle's old presentations are still there under the budget development tabs on the right-hand side.
Thank you for that. Okay. We're going to move right on with that too. Okay, so Waitsfield Kitchen. We mentioned it extremely briefly as just a heads up that we would be discussing it. We mentioned it extremely briefly at our retreat that we would be discussing that. So Lisa, did you want to kind of get it going, or Mike, give background, whatever you guys would like to do?
Well, Lisa and I have also been emailing because of her voice. We do have, I wanted to also introduce everyone knows Ray Daigle, our Director of Facilities, and also Kaya Korb, our principal at Waitsfield, who are both here and willing to talk about the project, some of the background as well. And we did receive additional information today, additional details that Ray can discuss that we can forward to the board. It was too late to include in the packet once we got it from our architects, but that can be included as well. So Ray, do you want to lead the conversation from the administrative team on this topic? Kaya, we would welcome you to come up too to join in the conversation.
Thank you. I don't think you all want to hear my voice, so.
We have an additional microphone over by Christine. If you want to. I think having an extra microphone will be good.
Good evening. So this is the discussion of moving the function of serving meals for the Fayston and Waitsfield schools from Fayston over to Waitsfield. And what was driving this is that the number of meals that are being moved from Fayston to Waitsfield is almost double the amount of meals that are served at Fayston. And from the food service side, they're saying it would be a lot more efficient for them to do it in the other way around, so that the bulk of the meals are staying in the same building they're prepared in, and moving fewer meals, a few miles down the road. The Waitsfield kitchen is, in effect, an old residential kitchen, and needs some significant work to make it into a commercial kitchen suitable for the schools.
And with that, I did have a question about some of the history that I know that Kaya as well as Christina have filled me in on why the kitchen was the size it was due to the restrictions of some of the town infrastructure.
I'm gonna let Kaya pick that up.
Well, the history of the kitchen at Waitsfield School, we've had our food prepared elsewhere for long before I came there. So food has come to Waitsfield School from both Harwood and from Fayston. There's been a longstanding collaboration with Fayston for the food service. And there was believed to be constraints that were connected to our capacity, our septic capacity, which in turn turns out actually not to have been true, but we did have water constraints before we were on town water, which we now are on. There was an issue in terms of capacity. So that's some of the historical what's been in place. I do think that noting it has been for some time that the number of meals that are transported has exceeded the meals that were being prepared in the other location is really the predominant factor. There's work to transport meals no matter what. It's gone very well. It's been, as I said, a longstanding collaboration that before we were even a unified district, we were sharing. The challenge is when you're moving 120 meals for lunch and 70 breakfasts, that's a lot of food to be fitting just even in one vehicle. So capacity for what functionally works.
So when you think about, is it an essential task to have happen in any one given year? It may not be, but the cumulative effect of so many years of having the bulk of the food prepared in a spot separate from where it is being produced, just is, it's inefficient in a variety of ways, mostly in time.
Getting delivered? Is it by bus or?
The food service, so part of how it happens is we have to have a food service worker who has a vehicle that can transport. So we are very fortunate to have great food service staff, one of whom has a truck. And it comes in the back of a truck when it's carried over. So we have all kinds of creative ways of that transport. But to be clear, we're not only transporting the food prepared in the other space, but then all of our dishes are then transported back, and then they have to be carried back again. So you multiply every component of the meal times more than double.
I'm sure this has been looked at thoroughly, but is there any thought to not transporting at all, having meals prepared at Feastin for Feastin and Waitsfield for Waitsfield?
So that was, that's been looked at a few times in the past and was cost prohibitive to make be feasible. So we really were looking at financing of it as being a driving factor. So currently the staffing, there's a staff person, there are 2 staff people, and they work to prepare the food and then serve the food. And it's 2 total between the 2 schools. It's pretty darn efficient for being able to produce all of that food and serve it. And so if we were to run it at each place, it would be more expensive. And we'd still need this kitchen at Waitsfield as well. I will say that while I have missed the aroma of some of the things being cooked in the school sometimes, like when the lunch arrived today, you could tell, you could smell it at the school, and I wished it had been earlier. It has not been an issue to have food that was coming from another spot. That is the fact that it was prepared somewhere else, I don't feel like means a diminished quality. The issue has to deal with just the sheer numbers, and things happen like, because we can have variation in the number of kids receiving breakfast. If we're serving 70 students in the variable, the end of how many might or might not get it in any good day, we run out of the food. Whereas if you're serving half that many, it's a little easier to have your variable on stock in place.
Question. So I'm assuming that there was a huge uptick with the free lunches and the free breakfasts, right? So what was it like before COVID? And I'm, like everyone else, anxious to see like what will happen next year. Will we go back to paying for families paying for their meals, and will there be this decrease in providing meals?
I imagine there might be people in the room who have a better knowledge even of this than I do, but my understanding is that the meals being free for this year is not just this year. It's anticipated to be continued for more than this year, is my understanding. So I don't think that next year there will be a change. Yes, there was an uptick that happened. That uptick is also a variety of factors. Waitsfield School is, well, you've got enrollment numbers. We're at the largest numbers we've had in 17 years. So there's that. We have just more bodies in the building. And a preponderance of them are eating the school lunch or breakfast. Traditionally, and I think there's a variety of reasons, but traditionally a greater percentage of the Waitsfield population has engaged in the school lunch and breakfast than of a percentage of the population in Feastin. We have a higher free and we had a higher free and reduced lunch number than was present in Feastin. That might have been a factor. I don't know, but yes, we are overall, as in all of our schools, serving a lot more meals now than we did, say, 4 years ago.
Answered your questions about the lunches and the continuation. from everything we've received, the superintendents, we believe that will be the case. There is not a definitive answer yet. The legislature took action for this year, but everything we're hearing is there is a good possibility that will continue. And I would also say, Lisa and I had shared at the retreat that there are a lot of details that we were not part of in the conversation, but we've been involved in ongoing conversations this year. We understand this has been a discussion from the board in previous years, and it is the overwhelming unanimous recommendation from the administration to move forward with the project.
Just want to, sorry, we'll go to you. I just want to say real quick that the discussion tonight then is to prepare for a vote at the next school board meeting. So if you have additional questions, this really is the time for clarifying questions. So go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I have a question and then maybe another question. Where is the money coming from? I guess, sorry, Mike, where's the money coming from?
We have money in our capital reserve, and I'll ask Lisa to chime in on the exact details. Lisa, are you able to jump in with those figures?
Yes. So the money is going to would be coming out of the maintenance reserve, our maintenance reserve account, which is $1.4 million. I'm sorry, $4.1 million in Q2. We'll have that much. The preliminary cost that we initially received, and Ray will go over this with you, has recently been updated. And so right now it's preliminary with the concept designs of construction, including soft costs, a total of $553,000, but that's a preliminary number. What we would like to move forward with is bring the engineers and the architects on board to really design, develop construction documents, and then go out to bid, and then we'll see what the bids come in at.
Administratively, we believe that that this has been discussed for a number of years. Costs will continue to climb based on the current environment we're seeing. So we think move forward with that. There would be the possibility. We would still have to move along pretty aggressively to get the project bid and complete by this coming summer. But as we get more information, there would be opportunities for the board to examine the additional information details and pause in that project if necessary. But we think that it's necessary to move forward.
I just have a question for clarification. I'm not sure I understand something. Currently, right now, all of the meals are prepared at Facein and are driven to Waitsfield. The plan is to build the Waitsfield kitchen, or to make it possible to then make all of the food in Waitsfield and have it bused to Facein. Is that right? I heard you say not having it in both kitchens is the point. You not have both. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
And just to add right now, so after meals are served, the dishes are boxed up, taken to Facein, washed, brought back to Waitsfield clean. So, but that step would be eliminated. Correct.
And we'd be able to take care of Facein dishes at Facein, Waitsfield dishes at Waitsfield. So that would be an additional efficiency we'd see.
For 6 years, when I was the principal at Duxbury, we brought all of our meals from Waterbury. They came and the dishes went back. They were served and kids ate at their desks. We didn't have it on either. So I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
Life will go ahead.
So what would the Facein kitchen be used for?
It would be used for staging the lunch, heating, keeping food warm. It would also be used for washing dishes for Facein. So there is additional. And if you know our chef, we have exceptional food service people at both schools. I can guarantee you that our chef at Facein will continue to use some of those ovens and other things to prepare food. She's quite a creative person. She had a taste test Tuesday yesterday for the students. And I think there was a similar program at Waitsfield, but just two exceptional employees.
Lisa, have you gone yet? Okay, go.
Oh. I talk too much. I don't know. I would just want to point out for people that don't know, this would be a similar model to what's happening in Moortown. So Moortown has a full kitchen, but they don't prepare food there. So the food comes from Harwood. It is transported to Moortown. They use the kitchen to do all the dishes and heat up food that needs to be heated up, but then don't need to bring anything back to Harwood.
I think go to Mike.
Cross at Brook too. But so would we have to hire additional staff next year for food service, or would it still just be the same? Okay.
Same complement, they would prepare the food at Waitsfield in a larger facility. And then the bulk of the food, rather than the larger share being transported to Waitsfield, the smaller share would be transported to Facein.
To follow up on the question, if Facein would then be used to wash the dishes, have we looked into just adding dishwashing to Waitsfield? Because that sounds like the functionality it's missing, yeah? Sorry if I missed it.
No, so what the kitchen at Waitsfield currently has capacity for is it doesn't have the cooking capacity, nor does it have the dishwashing capacity. We truly have a refrigerator that might be smaller than what many of you have in your homes that's in there, and a dishwasher that is likely older than anything has in their homes, that is used only by the after-school program. So what would happen is with the proposed changes is that Waitsfield would have the capacity for meals to be prepared there. You don't have to transport. All the food preparation could happen there, as well as food preparation could occur at Facein. You don't have to make the multiple trips back and forth with dishes. So dishes could be washed at Waitsfield, dishes could be washed at Facein. The part of the challenge now has to do not only with the multiple trips back and forth, but if you are preparing a meal for 10 and 3 of the people who are eating in your house, but you're needing to pack up the food for 7 to go to another place, it's more efficient if you can be not packing up the food for the 7 and doing all of the work of making it be able to be transported. So we have not, part of the project has been involved looking at adding the dishwashing to Waitsfield School. The changes that would need to happen, I would offer, are significant enough just even to put in the dishwashing capacity that it makes sense to then make it be a functional kitchen. And I think people were asking this. I want to clarify that Facein has the capacity, should it sometime it be decided to become the idea that both kitchens were running, that is not being removed. It's adding that capacity, which I think is what Moortown, having spent a little time in that kitchen, has now. It could become the functional kitchen. It's really about efficiency of staffing and preparation. So we're effectively serving meals for 250 students with 2 people.
Added conservation environmental concern that I have, we've had some trouble this year at Facein with our well. Waitsfield is on town water, so there is an efficiency that we would be using less from our well, preserving our water at Facein. We had some issues yesterday, again, that we believe is due to a faulty toilet. But I think that is an important point to make, that Facein is on a well.
Want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I guess I don't know, just this whole thing just seems weird to me. I'm not against the project, but we brought you on, Mike, and we just looked at your goals, and you're talking about putting together a plan for facilities. I'm looking at these numbers here, $500,000. And I was also shocked, not even surprised, but I was shocked to find that this project wasn't even included originally in the bond, is what I was told. Is that right? Correct. So now we want to go ahead and spend possibly up to $500,000 on this. There's no doubt that it needs to be refreshed at some point, but you're just hitting the ground running on your facilities project, or on your planning. And I want to see some action too, but this to me, I don't know. It seems like, yeah, this is nice to have. You just said a few minutes ago, I wrote it down, there's a lot of talk about Harwood Union High School. This is in facilities, especially the roof. And I'm wondering if we're spending, let's say we decide to spend 500,000, are there other options to look at for other schools that might need that money more right now? I also just wanted to say that this has political undertones to me, that perhaps somebody in the community might say, well, gee, why are we choosing Waitsfield to build up and pulling away from one school? Are there other political motivations behind that? And that's something I think needs to be addressed. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
So on the business page, there's also generally a capital improvement plan that is updated with regular facility needs and maintenance improvements. And I believe that both the kitchen and the roof have been on there, and that's all money that's set aside in our reserve funds. So I think we have the cash on hand, but there was some talk, yes, of doing it with the bond at one point. As a parent, this has been talked about since my first child entered Waitsfield, and she just graduated from Harwood last year. We just spent a lot of time talking about equity, and this is the only school in the district that does not have a commercial kitchen. So it's not like it's out of the blue, and I don't think it's politically motivated. I think it's the practical matter of efficiencies and making things easier and making sure that we're providing our kids with all the things that they were supposed to have. And quite frankly, I think the kitchen probably got held up because of the merger. So it's as a lot of the Harwood work is way overdue. This is also way overdue, and I think it would be incredibly frustrating and disappointing to hold it off any longer. And I don't think it would be the right decision.
I just want to second that. I have a daughter who graduated from Harwood in she's 29, and we were talking about that Waitsfield kitchen back then, it's a home kitchen, I think it's time. I agree with that.
I'm just noticing in the financial report, it says last year PO was issued to Truex Collins to develop concept designs for the kitchen, the roof, the Harwood entry and admin suite, the science wing, and then it says that we followed up around the kitchen. So I guess I'm kind of becoming confused why this one out of all the projects. Because the capital reserve, I don't quite understand the list thing. I appreciate some guidance on that. But I do remember from the retreat talking about how our capital reserve is way lower than what's recommended. So that suggests to me that it's not just like cash on hand that we can spend, but it's still like a decision we should make, weighing it against other options. So I guess my question is first about, did we follow up on any of those other things with Truex Collins? And if not, then just help me understand why the kitchen is the thing.
So we did have discussions about those other projects and the ability to pull them off in the amount of time that we were talking about, and just the scope of the work that would be involved with the science, any of the science wings. We looked at that and say, what could we possibly do? How would we make this work? One of the things that kind of put the brakes on a lot of this discussion was the fact that the middle schools weren't going to merge, which allowed some flexibility within the building at the high school to move those classes into that vacant middle school space so that you could actually do the renovations in the science wing, not just in an 8-week window in the summertime, because you're going to need more time than that to do what we need to do there. So those were things that we took into consideration. We looked at the front entry at the high school, and that was something that sure we could have done, but it would have been a stopgap. It would have been something that would have worked until we got the bond, until we did it right. And our feeling is we really don't want to do things twice. So we'd prefer to do it once, do it right. And we see that the kitchen is a high need. And to get to Mike's questions about the other things that are needed at the high school, roof work, such as items like that. A lot of that work, you don't want to do that before you change the structure underneath it. Right now, the roof isn't leaking, though there are areas that are at about the time we should be replacing it. When we started this project 8 years ago, we would have been well underway had we kept moving with that. This we feel is a prudent move to do now, considering that we have years before we're going to actually see a bond project come to fruition. And actually have, boots on the ground, if you will, doing any of the construction.
One thing that I've constantly heard is people are saying, well, we talked about this 15 years ago, or we talked about this 10 years ago. And maybe that's the case, So when I look at these projects, I always think to myself, well, yeah, my kitchen isn't great looking, but if I had a roof problem, I'd want to fix the roof first, right? It's even though that's not real sexy. That's probably the priority. I do understand what you're saying. I just think that at this point, we discussed at the retreat, going out, being that facilities is a big one. The bond did not pass. And what are we doing next? And now just going in and saying, well, we're going to, update this kitchen for $500,000 at one school. It's not that I don't think it's needed. I just think that I wasn't on the school board when this other plan was looked at, the capital improvement plan. Maybe there's other things, as Life said, to compare it to. Maybe there's other options where that money can be spent. But some of it could just be timing, and personally just joining the board in the last few months. I'm also know that the town of Waitsfield designates that building as an emergency operations center. I know when you do that, there are grants available to pay for certain things to those buildings. And I know that the Agency of Education does allow some towns to chip in, even though it's a school building, to pay for certain projects. So I think that those things are valid, questions to be asking.
Hey, did you want to, and then Christine?
I wanted to speak to the emergency status. I am not familiar with all the grants that are available, but we are currently only short-term emergency status. And you'll love that the plan, because it speaks to small town, if we end up being used as an emergency status, we go and get all the food from the VG that they have there, and they serve it because there is no food capacity there. But that truly is written into the emergency plan. And I want to note that it's not just an upgrade to the kitchen. The kitchen is not a functional kitchen that is there now. I just wanted to clarify that component. There was a comment about the political nature, and I don't know how one ever steps away from the political nature when people are talking about changes that happen in one town and not in another town. I think to clarify, though, this arrangement has been in place for quite some time in the way that it is. And the reason for a change is not because the arrangement of sharing between two schools doesn't work. It is that the numbers and the efficiency don't work right now. Not that one school deserves their food being there. It is really, it's not working very well. It's often at capacity beyond the one vehicle that's moving those things back and forth. So there's a challenge in making it work as it is now. I just want to speak to the issue of cycling through boards. It's not a clean slate in all the work that's ever been done. Every time there's a new group that transitions on an annual basis. And being in a large district with a lot of buildings, there has been this kind of wait for other people to have their time to have stuff done. So, I think politics aside, we've done large projects at Moortown. We just put in a $150,000 boiler at Facein. So we have allocated funds to schools that had questionable status in the past. So I don't think it was a political decision one way or another to provide the things that need to be provided in our school buildings for our students. Sure. We had approved a plan as a board to close schools, or, and specifically, Facein, but Facein still got a new boiler when it was due a new boiler. It still had new siding put on when it was due new siding. I think it's had roof work. Moortown also was questionable status, depending on what plan you looked at, but that school was taken care of. And, I think we have a responsibility as a board to make sure that all of our students and all of our schools have their needs met. And, it's unfortunately this one, because it's a little bit bigger than the 150,000 here, 125,000 there, has probably been put off a little bit longer. But it's also had just smaller projects. So if you defer all the work that was done at some of those other schools over the years, it has probably come to a pretty close number as at what we're looking at right now. And it's unfortunate that it was deferred for so long, because it probably would have been less expensive had it been done sooner.
Do I just speak if I'm on Zoom, or?
What did you say, Bobby?
Do I just, if I had my hand up and I didn't know if I should go ahead.
Right ahead.
Okay. It's interesting because I know that all the different ways lunches have been delivered to the school, and I know Waitsfield used to get the lunches from Harwood. Facein used to make its own lunches. And so, it seems like maybe the political issue that Mike is referring to, the idea of how all of these facilities are going to be used, and eventually we'll get into a facility study. But it seems likely to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these kitchens will serve a purpose and will get used regardless of how things pan out with the facilities. I mean, if ultimately Facein stops operating as a school, or Warren stops operating as a school, then we're faced with facilities that have kitchens, which could maybe use for other purposes. But am I sort of correct that ultimately this is a valuable investment to be able to give one of our highly populated schools an opportunity to make their own lunches and not have to transport from a smaller kitchen, massive, 2/3 of the lunch to the other school. That's what it sounds like to me. Am I correct?
I'm getting a shake of the head from Kaya. That right? Yeah. Is there any last questions, comments?
Is that okay? Just thinking, Christine, thanks for giving some history around like some of the other capital projects. And were those typically done through a budgeting process, or because right now, to me, this is feeling like it's kind of an extraordinary, urgent situation thing, and I'm just not understanding exactly why, or is this just how it usually rolls? Just like something comes up and.
So every year there's a 3-year maintenance plan that's updated as part of the budgeting process, and it lays out what's been done in previous years and what's going to be done over the next 3 years. The money isn't coming from the operating budget, nor would this money come from the operating budget. It always comes from the maintenance reserve fund, which we continue to fund on an annual basis through the budget process. We usually take our surplus and have the voters vote up or down whether we put that in the maintenance reserve, and it tends to get more votes in favor of doing that than the budget itself does. So I think our voters understand the importance of putting that money aside and using it to fund projects like this.
Reserve is not used on a particular time frame. It can be used at any time throughout the year.
Whenever those projects happen is when it gets spent. A lot of time it's during the summer because the schools aren't in session, but projects happen throughout the year.
On that note, like when roof repairs were done to Harwood, I don't remember having a discussion about this. How come this one is something that the board has to approve versus other capital improvements that seem to just happen?
There's going to take some money to do the design work. And typically design work is not included in capital reserve money. And you know, the roof, the middle school roof that was replaced this last summer, that was all part of a consent agenda back in the spring for capital projects for the summer.
Excuse me, just one logistical question. How was is Truex Collins or Collins, is that someone we usually contract with? We have an agreement with them or something?
So we've been working with them since 2014. They're our architects for the school district.
Okay, so with all that information, it'll be on the agenda for on the next agenda to vote about architect and all that stuff. So be on the lookout in 2 weeks, not next week. Okay. Thank you, Ray, for all that insight. So we're going to move on to action items. Our first action item is to appoint, thank you, Kaya, very much, for the Open Waterbury School Board seat. Jake, if you want to come right on up here. You can sit right at the table. So we had one letter of interest, which was in the board packet. We also had, you should see in the board packet too, the recommendation from the Waterbury Select Board. So you will have up to 5 minutes to kind of talk about yourself and all that stuff. And then board members may have questions.
You all hear me? Yes, you can. Okay. So, hi, everyone. My name's Jake Pittman. Maybe some of you know me. I grew up in both Waterbury Center and Waterbury, and I am a 2013 graduate of Harwood. After Harwood, I attended college at SUNY Plattsburgh over in New York, where I received a degree in human development and family relations. That's similar to just a human services degree or a social work degree, as some people compare it to. And after SUNY Plattsburgh, I went to live in Burlington for a couple of years. And after Burlington in 2019, I moved back to Waterbury. Waterbury just seemed like the logical decision for me. I really enjoyed growing up in the community. I had a wonderful experience going through all of the schools in the Waterbury community, and I enjoyed my time at Harvard a lot. So I wanted to be back living in this community where I have, a strong support structure of family and friends. I'm also an assistant coach for the high school cross-country team, which I started doing last fall. So this is my second season doing that. And I also was a co-head coach for the middle school track and field program at Harwood this past spring. And it was through both of those endeavors that I remembered why I went to school for what I did. I just have a natural passion and desire to see success in young people and adolescents, and particularly in the community that I grew up in. I really remembered why I got the degree that I did, why I originally went to school for teaching, actually, and switched it at one point. So obviously, I thought the best way to get involved was to reach out to the school district board, which I did actually 6 or 7 months ago. And then they told me that I needed to wait. And I reached back out, or no, they reached out to me just a couple months ago. And I thought I should give this a shot because this is something that I am passionate about. So if I am voted onto the board, I just want to be transparent about, maybe some thoughts and feelings that many of the board members might have about me. Some of you might be asking the question, am I getting a little in over my head? Do I have the necessary experience that is needed to sit on a school district board such as this one? Those are excellent questions to have because I ask myself those questions constantly since I've been committing to this process. For the next 5 to 6 months until the tenure runs up in March, I'm going to be constantly assessing whether or not I am providing real value as a member of the board. Through self-assessment, through feedback I receive through all of you, I'm going to be asking myself some pretty important questions because I want to make sure I really am providing value. That's my number one priority. I don't just want to sit here and, listen and not engage. I want to get to a point sooner rather than later where I feel comfortable engaging. I want to watch these videos that have been discussed because there's a lot I have to learn. And part of what I said in my letter of interest is that through coaching, I have a connection with some of the students that I think is quite valuable. I'm a younger person, if you will. I mean, I was at Harvard less than 10 years ago. And I feel like I really do not feel that far removed from Harvard. I feel like although these students currently are technically of a different generation than I am, it all seems very familiar to me. Right when I came into Harvard in 2009, everybody had phones in their pockets suddenly. That was right when I got to school. Social media blew up. I feel like I understand the way that kids interact and communicate, and I understand the way that they perceive certain changes that are made by the administration as well as the school board that represents them. And that's the kind of perspective I'm hoping to give as a board member. There have been times in the recent past that I think at times the board has maybe missed the mark on a few policy decisions and changes or whatever you want to call them that were made that garnered, negative student feedback, negative student response. And I saw some of that and said that could have been prevented. And I think that is where the value lies as me as a board member. I think I'm able to provide that perspective on behalf of the students. That's where I want to focus. And that's ultimately my goal through the next 5 to 6 months is, am I able to provide that kind of value? Am I able to be an effective board member? And, come March, we will see. And, hopefully, I mean, if everything goes well, I really do want to run for re-election and have a whole tenured seat. I enjoy engaging in conversations like these. I just enjoy doing work like this, and I thought, why not give it my best shot joining the district board? Thank you. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for him? Go ahead, Leif.
Just to make a comment. First time I'm meeting you, and I just thought your statement was just wonderful. Like, I have no idea what your stance on issues is, but you're bringing these values about centering our students, and appreciate your service with coaching. And I have great confidence that you'll be able to contribute. But I love the idea that, I'm also on a temporary until March, so you kind of help me think about what I'm doing here and think about, okay, yeah, this is really a trial period to see if I can add value. So I love that perspective and I appreciate that. I'm sold.
Lisa, go ahead.
I'll echo that I love what I hear, and I think you would be an ideal candidate for the school board. My question is, are you employed by the school district?
Right, that was the entire last paragraph of my letter of interest. So, and I know, Mike, do you want to go right now?
Go ahead. Sure, I can answer the question. I spoke to our board leadership. I did send a letter to Secretary French preemptively. The process is normally for, if there's a request and it came through COVID with the ability to employ board members in roles like nurses, paraprofessionals, on-staff substitutes. But we felt it was wise to seek the counsel of the secretary prior to the board taking action, but after the recommendation from the Waterbury Select Board. So we received a letter today approving that exception. So should the board choose to make the appointment of Jake, the exception has been made.
I think he's basically able to serve and work for the district under the same waiver statute that I am as a substitute. So, yeah. And thank you for stepping forward.
You're welcome. So I do want to comment just a little bit on that. Obviously, I included a pretty lengthy section at the end of the letter of interest about that. And, I'll keep it short. I think the reality of me being a coach and working with the kids, the reality is that I think that is a pro for my membership on the board. I have a connection with the students. I understand that logistically it is an issue because I am employed by Harwood, but again, that a variance has been requested and granted. And yeah, I'm just trying to reiterate that I think there's only positive outcomes that come from my connection with the students. I'm able to hear things from a very objective stance. A lot of these students look at me and from what I believe, I think they have a sense of trust in me that they might not have in certain other authority figures in their life. I mean, for one, I am not their parent. I am not their teacher. And I'm not, that much older than them. And they see me at times as more of a peer. And I think there's a lot of value in that. I think I can bring certain perspectives from my coaching experience to the board that will be valuable.
Go ahead, Christine. Okay. You go right ahead.
I would move that we appoint Jake Pittman to the Waterbury seat for the HUUSD board until March 2023.
Does that look okay? Is there a second? Okay. You're cool with Jacob? Cool with Jacob? Okay. Ashley. Oh, been a month since a regular meeting. You go right ahead, Lisa. Sorry. I was yeah, go.
So I just want to start by making this super clear that this is not this next comment has nothing to do with you as far as your character goes. I'm uncomfortable. The only eligibility restriction for school board members is that they're not employed by our school district. If there's like a extenuating circumstance that makes it so we really need to cross that line, I get it. But to just start blurring that line feels wrong to me, because I just think then what makes it so somebody else that works for our school district doesn't, want to have the same exception made. And I did a little bit of research online, just trying to figure out whether that held up legally. And there's a lot of legal opinions out there that that really is not. If you're employed by the school district in that you're making money, not a volunteer position, then it's really not best practice. So I think that's where I lie. And again, nothing to do with you. I think you're an amazing candidate, and I wish that those two things didn't conflict. That's my stance.
Yeah, so 16 VSA 558, secretary may waive the provisions of this section for employment of a specific individual as a substitute teacher, coach, or supervisor or extracurricular activities for a period not to exceed 1 year, which may be renewed. And I think the distinction is usually drawn between regular employees and employees like coaches and substitute teachers, because they're not subject to the collective bargaining agreement. So he, wouldn't, and, it would probably even so be inappropriate maybe to be on a negotiating committee. But I think somebody like that can serve without prejudice.
That ends with which may be renewed if the school district or supervised union is unable to hire another qualified person through no fault of its own. So it's not like it's just able to be renewed.
Right. We've had one application in the months since this has been posted. So it's not like people are banging down the door to get in. Mike, did you want to go?
Yeah, I can see where Lisa's coming from. I think that, I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to vote for you. I also like the colors of your letterhead. Not sure what that was all about, but just came naturally to you. But I agree a little bit with Lisa. I think that it is blurring the lines a little bit, but I also feel, you know, with Christine, with respect to what Christine's position is too, is that right now he's eligible. But I could see, and I know this board has had plenty of history with other coach issues, that there could be issues. And so just to keep that in mind, that this is for a few months. It's great to have the full board for the budget session. And but I do agree, Lisa, a little bit that, you know, it is getting to blur the lines and, you know, but anyway.
Lee? Yeah, go next. So I see where you're going, Lisa. I'm sorry, this is really loud. There's no reason mine is extremely loud, but at the same time, I think that you know, being a Waterbury resident and seeing this seat flip over continuously this past season has been really frustrating. And Jake has the passion. He, you know, sadly applied 6 months ago, and it was like a day later than when we were receiving letters. So I guess it's important to have a full board for budget season. And as a Waterbury resident, it's important for us to have all of our voices here. So I don't know if there's a percentage of like how often, you know, there's what, like 16%, he's a 16% employee, or like how you, that percentage. So anyway.
So one of the reasons for that rule is to avoid bribery or conflict of interest in the candidate, or, you know, in the board member. And I feel like, you know, as Jacob acknowledged in his letter of interest, if it came down to, you know, negotiating salaries or any of those topics, or it would be a very clear conflict of interest, he could exempt himself, just as we are all encouraged to do when we have a conflict of interest in the matter that we're discussing and voting upon. I feel like, you know, maybe if there was a second candidate, you'd be ruled out automatically. But the fact of it is we don't have a second candidate. It's been open for a while. Jacob is ready, willing, happy, and excited to serve. And I think it would be very beneficial to have his opinions and votes and experience in matters where he is not conflicted out.
Okay. Oh, Cindy, you go right ahead.
Isn't that, Mike, the point of asking for a waiver and talking to the Department of Education, you know, Secretary French, and hearing back from the select board that it's been open and upfront what his position is relative to our school? That's the point of being able to ask for a waiver of whatever thing you're asking for a waiver for. And so that gives me great comfort that you were able to do that you did that, and that the Secretary French gave the okay.
When does spring track start?
I think it's March.
So will you technically not be an employee by the time this is March 7th is up?
I mean, that's a little complex, I suppose, because I'm going to continue coaching year in and year out. That's my objective. So, I mean, it might coincide right with the end of my tenure, might be the start of spring track season, but I don't even know if that's an interesting question to ask, because again, like come every spring and fall, I do plan to continue coaching. So You know, and while I have the mic, I do. I just wanted to add on to the whole, you know, I had a sentence in the letter of interest about, you know, recusing myself if it's necessary because of whether it could be anything really, but whenever a conflict of interest presents itself, I'm obviously very comfortable just stepping away. You know, again, I'm trying to have a positive experience, of course, being on this board. And if I do, I will run for re-election. And, you know, if this conversation has to come up again come March, then it will, and we'll talk about it again. Yeah.
Okay, let's vote. Okay, we're going to bring up the tally sheet. Ashley.
Yes.
Bobby.
Yes.
Christine.
Yes.
Cindy. Jonathan.
Yes.
Lisa.
No.
Marlena.
Yes.
Life.
Yes.
Tori. Kim is not here. Oh. Just 1 second. It's okay. Kelly. I think Mike's a yes. Okay. So that's going to pass. Congratulations. Welcome to the board.
Very much, everybody, for listening to me. I really appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all.
You'll just need to get sworn in before our next meeting at the town clerk in Waterbury.
Okay. I didn't know about that part. All right.
And you put your hand up and you say something, and it's totally not like a huge, I mean,
Yeah. All
if
right.
you want a huge ceremony, I mean, sure you could bring people.
Yeah, I'll invite all my friends.
Pictures.
Yeah, you got to show up.
And you're welcome to the table. You just can't vote on anything. But if you'd like
right
to.
now. Yeah.
Yes.
That was going to be one of my questions. Should I stay seated here?
You can. Yep.
I will.
Is your seat. Or any one of them you're welcome to sit at, but right. Yeah. Okay, so next agenda item is going to adopt policy C6 and policy F24. So I would need a motion for that.
I move to adopt policy 6 and C6 and policy F24.
Is there a second? Okay, a discussion on that. Oh, I'm gonna.
Is that what keeps happening? Oh, okay, thank you. Can we make suggestions to amend any language right now?
No.
It's up or down?
It's from the state.
And we're voting for both of them together. Or you can't, or separate them. Okay.
That we're actually adopting the motion. Basically, the fact that we moved it to adoption at however many meetings ago, that said, we're okay with the language. And we're going to adopt that here tonight. So we're not, you know, and so that's generally how it goes. And it's usually language that's given to us by the state or the AOE.
Okay. Well, I guess this is a comment then. I think that the language of homeless students, I thought a lot about what Marlena said at the meeting when it came up. And it's degrading. They're not homeless. It's not modern language to use. It's belittling, it's dehumanizing. You can say they're houseless, maybe, if that's technically what they are, or students experiencing homelessness. But I just, you know, as I've thought about it more, it's just words matter. And I think at the time we said, well, that's what the state uses. And that to me shouldn't bound us. We could have a line that says, you know, the state calls this homeless, but we're calling it this. So just make the translation as we go along. I don't like that policy as it stands. I don't know if we said no, if we would then get another chance to revise it or what. And if it does get voted in, I think we should take those kind of concerns more seriously in the future.
In relation to this policy, it actually refers to the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which is a federal act. So I would just recommend before we would change any language that the board would seek legal counsel on that.
Any further discussion? Okay, is there any objection to approving policy C6 and F24? Okay, not yet. Life, you object? Okay. But that will pass.
My hand is raised also.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marlena. Shout out next time in case I don't see you. Okay. So our next action item will be to appoint 2 board members to the negotiating team for support staff. Go ahead, Mike.
Did we move something on the agenda about the nurse thing, or is that coming up? Okay, sorry.
Of a noter, I would forget. Yeah, no. So it's to appoint 2 board members to the negotiating team for support staff contracts. Is there anybody jumping to do that? Yes, come on, guys. Don't have all your hands up at once. Come on.
These are non-union, no, not non-union.
So this is para-educators, this is custodians, this is food service workers. Go ahead.
The possible time commitment estimate be for people who agreed to join this committee? If we know.
I think Christine's like once a month, I believe, for a few hours, a couple hours. Go ahead if you have. Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that. I'm not stepping forward, nor do I think I should be, given my current situation. But yeah, it's generally, if you meet twice a month, it's, 1.5 to 2 hours for each meeting. And sometimes it's generally like once a month. And it's generally, I'm happy to talk to anybody about the experience, even though I won't do it.
The board has secured its legal counsel, Pietro Lin, to serve as counsel. So he would be the chief negotiator. Lisa Essler and myself will serve as professional consultants as well for the board.
Any more information you can give us? Like what? So once or twice a month for how many months, and kind of what's the what qualifications do you anyone can just do this?
So at the outset, generally at your first meeting, you agree upon we're going to meet X number of times. It's, probably 4 to 6 times over the course of that many months. So you'll know generally at that first meeting what your schedule is going to look like, and you'll decide on dates. So when maybe the homework outside of the meeting is just making yourself familiar with the CBA, and then just kind of reviewing any suggestions and putting some thought into them. But, you generally discuss them as a group in the meeting. And generally, legal counsel does most of the talking, and then you have dialogue behind the scenes.
If you are not planning to run for re-election, this would not be a seat for you, because it would probably go past March. Most likely go past March. So that's just a little FYI for anybody who needs some additional information.
Where the meeting or the negotiations are taking place?
So I think that's probably set up during ground rules. Christine and I have done it for a couple go arounds, and because it was during COVID, it was all on Zoom. And I don't know what it's going to be like this time around. I mean, Zoom is super convenient, but I don't know if that's what everybody's going to want to do. But it was before it happened, like here in this library, has happened in person, so.
You can put my name down.
Okay, who else wants to do it? Come on, let's go. Ashley, you want to do it too? It's actually really interesting. It really is. It's interesting. It's informative. It's, yeah.
I would say it's very important work, very important board work.
Somebody said, was it union or non-union? They're part of a union, right? They're part
It's
of a union.
union.
Whoever asked that question, and
Yeah.
I thought we said it wasn't, it is
Yep.
a union
Yep.
negotiation.
Okay, so I would need a motion. Go ahead, Mike. Your mic.
Make a motion to appoint Victoria and Ashley to the negotiation team for support staff contracts.
Is there a second? Okay, discussion. Go ahead.
You're great at it.
What did you say, Dory? Yeah, we can totally do a typo fix. Just 1 second. I just want to make sure, does anybody in Zoom land have a comment, question?
Thanks for stepping up.
Hi, Jonathan. Okay, we're going to bring up the tally sheet. Okay. Does that look good? Who made the motion? Mike, did you made the motion? Okay, was there a second? I'm sorry, there was a second, right? So no, just we did discussion. Is there any objection to appointing board members, Tori and Ashley, to the negotiation support staff contracts? Or actually, maybe I'll do a roll call. Ashley, we'll just do a roll call because I think Ashley, you're good. Okay. Bobby?
Yes.
Christine?
I am going to abstain because of my status.
Yep. Cindy? Jonathan?
Yes.
Lisa? Yeah, Lisa? Marlena?
Yes. Did you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Or you want to vote for yourself? Kelly and Mike. Okay, so that's going to pass. Welcome. So what I'll do is I'll put you guys in touch with Pietro and all that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda requests. We're getting there. First one is the, sorry, I had my paper here. Christine, I think it was by you for the mascot review. Do you want to just talk about it? Or actually, I'm sorry, we should do a motion first, right? Sorry. Yes, technically. Okay, so I would need a motion to first school mascot review, if anybody would like to make that motion. Cindy. Oh. Okay. We're just getting wording down. Does that look good, Cindy? Is there a second? Okay, yes. Okay, so discussion. So Christine, go ahead and if you want to just talk about it.
Yeah, just acknowledging that a mascot review is part of the policy that we just adopted. And I don't really think that that's something that specifically the board needs to do. I think it's the superintendent or designees. But I do think it would behoove us to get status updates on the way and make sure that we're aware of what's going on, and it's, in a public forum as well. And so, the general community has an understanding too of what's happening.
So just clarification. So what part of the agenda would it show up in? Would it be a discussion, or would it be okay if the superintendent put it in his report? Any of that?
Great. We have all the mascots, and the only one that would be a discussion point would be our Highlander. Others are all cougars, eagles, foxes, bobcats, wolverines, and a tree.
Was that last one, Mike? What was that?
Wolverine, a tree is Warren. Waitsfield is the Wolverines.
Yes, that's right. It's like on their letterhead or not letterhead, but yeah. And the Wolverine, that's really cool. That is cool.
But this is in relation to the policy the board recently passed, and I would be happy to provide further information and conversation.
Is there any other discussion about this? Okay. So is there any objection to the motion, which is move to add mascot review to a future agenda? Okay, not seeing any or hearing any objection, that's going to pass. Okay. We are trudging along. This is great. Okay. Mike, nurse leader thing is going to be after the next agenda request. So our next agenda request is from Life. So it's about COVID mitigation. So I would need a motion first, if anybody has a motion.
Can I make it? I already have like wording and stuff. Yes, please. There's a handout coming around, but yeah. Okay, folks who are online, I just emailed the handout to your.
Is someone going to make a motion? Yeah.
Yes. So the motion I'd like to add a discussion agenda item in the future about oversight and policy related to the mitigation of respiratory and airborne illnesses. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
It's going to be just 1 second. We're going to get wording. Life's going to email that to Kelly, and then she'll get the exact wording right off the bat. So pause for 1 second. By the way, I hope it's really going to be warm and for Halloween, especially for those people who have little kids to go trick-or-treating. And no rain, please. Last year, I think it was like pouring rain, and yeah, 30%. What about temperatures? What does it say for temperatures? Ashley, did you just say snowing? No.
I will say I was with a group of students who was very upset about the high temperatures today. They are hoping for cold temperatures and snow in the very near future.
Stop it. 17th of November is, no.
A wise person once told me there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear.
I mean, geez, when it's cold, they want it warm. When it's warm, they want it cold. I mean, you'd think they'd be happy they could wear like shorts to school without their parents getting mad because it's, 30 degrees. Oh my goodness. Okay, so Life, can you just make sure that this is the correct wording?
That looks great.
Oh, you want to just turn off for just 1 second? So we would need a second for this motion. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Kelly, is it possible to, thank you.
Kelly's just going to bring up something on screen for Life.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I had a couple slides here because there's kind of some visuals that I wanted to share. The first slide is sort of the thesis statement here, that this stuff is important. My understanding for the kind of burden of proof around getting something on the agenda is that one, it's important to us, important to schools, which is our what we're doing here, and the second, that it's our business. So a couple bullet points opening up to just kind of try to make that point. COVID, respiratory illness, we saw in we heard from Mike that there's a lot of this RSV going around. We know that flu is bound to be a tough flu season, so that's why we included that. So just points around why this is important to schools. I mean, first of all, we want schools to remain open, right? That's super core, super important. There's been several school closures in Vermont this year due to COVID already. Secondly, when students are ill or staff, which I call interrupted schooling here, it's just tough on everybody, right? I mean, obviously teachers being ill, that's going to add to their workload, add to their cumulative fatigue, and same with students. They miss school. And for teachers, it's really hard when you have one or more students consistently missing school to try to figure out how to move your class forward. It's incredibly stressful. And then just thinking about our schools and their kind of role as community hubs, they do all these other things that's very much related to COVID and respiratory illnesses, right? So how we model to our community, what I might do that. So thank you. Good idea. Yeah, so the modeling thing, like, how do we approach these things, right? I mean, honestly, Lisa being on here sick tonight, that was rough. I'm not sure that's the message we give to our community. I appreciate her dedication. Messaging, right? Schools are hubs of communication in our community. Lots of information we could be pushing out around, vaccinations, which I haven't seen much of, et cetera. And then a place to distribute resources. So when we're talking about masks, tests, et cetera. So it is important. COVID is important. And I also think there's a strong argument for it being board business. All right. Right in our vision, we have, lines like equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. Because of those things above, you can't be effective and efficient with those things happening. Safety is certainly a core concern here. And the equity thing is definitely a major consideration. We know that COVID and other illnesses impact populations that are vulnerable because of systems more than others. So, people of the global majority, students living in poverty, students experiencing homelessness, as we mentioned before, and then students living with people who are at higher risk of COVID complications, which is a lot of people in Vermont. It's estimated to be as high as 38%. I saw this Kaiser Foundation report today. And then we have students themselves who are immunocompromised, who need to access our spaces. As a school board, we also have an oversight function. So just thinking about the essential work of school boards, right, it includes the idea that we're monitoring system operations. So the idea that this might be more operational, we have an oversight function around it as well. And then our main function being around setting and enforcing and revising policies. Just looking through our policies, there's a lot of policies that are related to this that would suggest that this is something we should be looking at too. So there's an HIV, sexually transmitted disease policy. There's a policy about wellness and well-being. In there it says, the first line is that we recognize the inseparable relationship between the student's academic potential and their overall state of well-being. So obviously, as we'll see in these other slides, this has a lot to do with well-being. And then we have two policies around head lice. I'm not sure whether others knew this. I didn't know this till I started looking at the policies. But just thinking about, things that we take seriously because they can spread. I'm sorry, I got to talk about head lice now. The first line of the head lice policy is that this stuff is, head lice are not dangerous. That's a major contrast to COVID, which is. But if you look through these, you will not believe the kind of stuff that we put in policy that we should be doing around head lice. If a student is suspected to have head lice by anybody in the school, the nurse can check them. They can send them home if they find any, and they have to be cleared before they come back. We recommend that the parents come in with the student so that when the nurse checks that student, they can show the parents how to do it. And in fact, the nurse can, it's recommended, might check the parents as well. All right, so this is like taken super seriously. There's all this stuff around notifying all the staff, putting out information, checking other students that have it. Okay, this is around lice, which we say is not dangerous. So that policy was put in place 2017. I actually think it's terrible policy, but the school board at that time thought it was our business. So just point being, I think this is as well. The rest of these I'm going to go through pretty quick. This is, again, COVID is important. It's still a thing. The pandemic's not over. It's not the flu. So this chart shows us that there's a lot of deaths in the world. The US has had over 1 million deaths from COVID, and we've done much worse than other comparable countries. So the United States approach to this has not been good, and it continues to see 2,500 people or so dying per day for the last several months during a very low point. Long COVID is the thing that I'm most worried about. So thinking about from a parent point of view, this is a super scary thing that we don't really understand and could cause permanent damage. So this is from the National Institute of Health website. You can go and check it out. If you really want to freak yourself out, you can click on all those little, each of those is a little, give you a bunch of symptoms with different parts of the body. This is what the CDC points to. And you can see these quotes, I pulled a few, right? It happens to kids. It can happen to asymptomatic kids. The only way to prevent is to not get it. We don't know how to treat it. It's really serious. We do not want to get COVID. So there's information out there that COVID is mild. Cases are not a big deal. Again, the Department of Health and our AOE told us that it's like the flu. That does not pass muster. It is not like the flu. And if you think it is, I just ask you to click into some of those resources. So all of these in the slideshow are clickable with citations. So this next slide, I was just trying to understand, like, how did we get here? And so I looked back at the Vermont Digger articles around COVID-19, and it's kind of striking to me. So the graph here is daily hospitalizations. So since we don't have good data from tests, this is the data that they're using for predicting surges. I mean, hospitalizations are, you know, pretty solid place where you're going to find out what's happening, right? So if we look at it, last summer, 2021, was when we ended the state of emergency. The governor said, you don't have to mask all the time everywhere. Then that was in May. And then over the summer in June, they said, but we're still going to mask in schools. So that's where it says school masking recommendation. And then look what happens as we're masking in schools, which you might recall was a huge controversy. And our superintendent got national press coverage for saying, this is wrong. Our state should be saying it's required, because now we're leaving every school to make this call themselves, which every school in Vermont except for one did. So you notice that graph going up there, that's Delta, right? Last fall was rough. Delta hit right at the beginning of school. It was, as Mike, our superintendent, has mentioned, one of the hardest times in education ever. And so as we see it going up, we notice a couple things. One, there was another controversy that happened in November, which was that towns were asking for mask mandates, and eventually the legislature agreed with the, thank you, Kelly, for that cursor there. I need a little laser pointer or something. The legislature eventually said, well, towns can decide to mask themselves. So that was a huge controversy. It was last year about this time. And the vaccine became available for kids, which was something people were waiting for a long time. At about the same time, just to mention, okay, within the United States, which has not done well during the pandemic, we were the one of the worst at that point in terms of case rate. Okay, so that's why it says Vermont 5th highest. So you see Delta going up and up and up. It kind of peaks somewhere in there. It's overtaken by Omicron as we're getting towards that peak. Okay, our second and third highest deaths in Vermont happened at that time. They were as high as they were in December of 2020. Okay, bad time for Vermont. At that point, as we're kind of at that peak, the Department of Education says, you don't have to contact trace anymore. This is completely overwhelming. We're not going to do test to stay anymore. You don't have to test to be able to be back in school. And we're no longer going to record how many cases are in schools. So up to that point, they've been reporting, hey, this is how many cases we're seeing in each school. I can't remember whether it was on a daily or weekly basis. Okay, so sort of at the peak of that Omicron in December, January, they kind of dropped a bunch of stuff. Omicron winds down, you see it going down, 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 and then they get rid of indoor masking altogether. They say that towns don't have to do it, schools don't have to do it, and you don't have to tell anybody if kids have COVID in classrooms. So at that point, as parents, we had no idea what our kids were dealing with. So that's kind of at that bottom piece, and then it starts going up again with Omicron, BA2. All right, and so you see that second peak, and you see that somewhere in there, Vermont was the worst in the entire country. So again, like just trying to recognize that Vermont did really well at the beginning of the pandemic. We have not done well since. And we've had some times when we were doing really badly compared to most. And in fact, as that went up and peaked, came back down sort of on the general, we see that in May, we had the most cases for the entire school year. So at the end of last year, as we dropped everything, we were doing really, really badly in our schools. And at that point, the state got rid of PCR testing. So it was all at home. And you see, as that kind of came down, that's where I mentioned 2,500 people a week in the US. That's kind of plateaued out. And that's where we've been. It's just kind of it like circulating around. And so as we started up in the fall just now, we've had less protections than ever. We don't have data collection, testing. I just put question marks next to these things because I still don't even know what's happening with them. I don't know if we're handing out masks. I don't know if we're trying to inform people about the vaccinations. And just to mention that this is not just us, this is across the state because this is what the AOE and the Department of Health said. It's like the flu, it's not a big deal. You don't have to do the stuff. And then we know that we had an outbreak last week. So that's to bring us up to speed. Just to recognize that we've been through a lot in the last year and we've lost the mitigations that we once had in place. So this next slide shows trends over the last several years. Again, a very solid metric that doesn't rely on testing. It's people who come into the emergency room, they get tested. Anybody there? And what I just want people to recognize is that if you follow that 2021 line, which is the blue one, you see it going way up on the right side of the chart. It kind of ends with a big upswing. That was Delta, end of Delta. Into Omicron, if you go over to the left and pick it up at that yellow dotted line, that's this year. So last year it went up in the winter and then it went way super high. And you notice this year's trend line has been higher most of the year. And we're right on that same trajectory. Okay, so just thinking what happened last year and how bad it was, as of now, it looks really similar. And so what I'm saying is we can't just go into this winter and say, hopefully it's going to be better. We still have holidays coming. We have new variants coming, unlike last year where there's a bunch of them. And we don't have masks. So just pretending that it's going to be fine and we'll kind of deal with it as we go along, we're in like a much worse situation than last year, which was really, really hard. And so this last slide just shows this is our current status. Well, these are as of last week from the CDC. And just to recognize that at some point, February of this year, they stopped measuring transmission in the same way they were before. So that map on the right is the way we always talked about transmission up until February. By that metric, it's really bad. It's all red. It's high. Okay, not just substantial, it's high all across our region. CDC said, hey, let's make a nicer map because this is really stressful. And so on the left, this is what we've been using since February, which is community levels, which is really more based on whether hospitals are overrun. So there's a lot of critiques of this. It's a lagging indicator. By the time those get read, you're probably already in the surge. I have critiques of it. But what I'm asking, and actually that one on the left is not accurate because the surveillance report came out today that puts Vermont in that medium category. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that rather than ignore this, we should talk about it. And we should recognize that maybe our state is not, their guidelines are not necessarily the be all end all. Maybe we look at something like CDC, which I have a lot of critiques with, but is a pretty decent, moderate starting point. And the big difference there is that CDC says, hey, when stuff gets hot, when you have a surge or an outbreak, you should respond. Nobody wants lockdowns. Nobody wants masking forever. Nobody wants remote schooling, but when things are bad, you might want to put something in place temporarily. And importantly, have a plan for that before it gets bad. That way you can message to your community, you can have the tests ready, you can have the masks ready, whatever you want to do, you'll be ready. And so I think it's our responsibility for all those reasons I said in the first slide. And I guess at this point, we're just saying we should at least have a conversation about it. Sorry that took so long.
Kelly, could you just put the motion back up just so we can make sure that we see the motion again? So this is where you can ask questions. We're not really debating it. We're just, you can ask clarifying questions. It's, do you want to see it on a future agenda with his motion, which would be add a discussion agenda item in the future about oversight and policy related to the mitigation of respiratory and airborne illnesses, including COVID. Or if you need to ask a clarifying question, go Lisa.
I guess, well, question for Life first, and then it kind of maybe segues into you, Kristen. Future agenda seems vague, knowing how not quickly things get on the agenda. So maybe thinking about whether we want to amend to get a little more specific there, and then also maybe just directed at you, Kristen, like what does is that possible to get it on an agenda with time to have this actually, be effective for the winter?
I support this conversation being on the agenda, but I'm just curious what and who are you looking to present at an agenda? Perhaps maybe you'd want to know where it fits in on the time. Like, are you looking for the school nurse to come in or a school nurse? Are you looking for the superintendent to come in or you just, I guess, what action are you looking for the board members to take at a future discussion of that?
Thank you. That's why I mentioned the discussion agenda, because I'm not sure. Like, I have my ideas. I could potentially see a policy committee coming out of it. I could see Mike and the nurses presenting and saying, okay, this is the plan for, future oversight and transparency. And we say, that sounds great. Let's go with that. I'm not sure. But my understanding is the discussion always happens a meeting before there's motions anyway. So in light of that, to respond to you, Lisa, I think, yeah, my original wording said a near future agenda or something. But I would suggest getting it on next meeting if it was me, because then you have another meeting after that. And I think we're probably into the holidays at that point, if not already past them.
I know when we were having the discussion about the kids going to Maine, one of the things that got brought up was that people were tired of this and that they were just ready to not be worrying about it and that the state the state recommendations were that we didn't need to be worried about it anymore, essentially. And I think we need to be thinking about it a lot. As a school nurse, I can tell you head lice is the worst. And just come to a school when they have a head lice outbreak sometime and you'll take back everything you said about it not being a problem. It's huge. But anyway, I think that we need to, I think as a board, we need to stay on top of this whole issue. And if it's just discussion and being sure that we know where we're at, I still think the concept of us being clear about what our future, or as a board, for us to know what our plan is. Like today we learned where there was an outbreak at Harwood, the response was to send letters. It was the recommended response from the state, but it was to send letters to everybody in the school or the classroom. I wasn't sure which, in the school. So now we know that. We know that when there's an outbreak, there will be a written communication. That's a start anyway. But it gives us an opportunity to talk about that, maybe give you some ideas about different things that you might want to add into your procedural schedule or not, or talk about why not. And that's all. I just want us not to lose sight of it.
Does anybody want to go first before Mike goes again? At this second, I mean, you have another chance, so don't worry.
It wasn't fully answered. Can this be put on the next meeting? Is that even a possibility?
Maybe I have to look at what we already have on to begin with, but possibly as a discussion item. Mike, did you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, I totally agree with Cindy. I think that people are fatigued out of certain things, but I think I could not put together something like this. I just want to say that I can't do that. And these are not stock slides. You spent a lot of time on this. And thank you for doing that. But I definitely think we should have a discussion. I guess I was a little surprised to hear, and without coming across as being a micromanager, that there was considered an outbreak, but yet we are having assemblies. I don't know. That seems a little weird to me. And perhaps, as Cindy said, staying on top of it, and maybe there is something we're missing, and maybe the state says send home a letter, maybe there is more we could do. Maybe as if we considered an outbreak that we don't do school assemblies. But again, I think a discussion once and for all, kind of talking about what's going on. We're living with it. And I know there was an article again today, I think in 7 days, about RSV. So I think this is a good idea to probably discuss the respiratory stuff.
A couple of comments. First, I do want to make a clarification. The closures we saw at Spalding High School, as well as U32, were not COVID closures. They were closures due to absences. There were a variety of reasons. In talking to those two superintendents, COVID was a factor, flu was a factor, RSV was a factor, personal days were a factor, pre-scheduled sick days for dentist appointments and doctor's appointments were a factor. So I just want to make clarification that that was not the case. And I also want to clarify and reiterate what I said earlier regarding the absences we had last week related to COVID, which classified as an outbreak. We have not seen spread of COVID in our schools. It was not an outbreak in Harwood High School. It was an outbreak of COVID in homes, outside settings. And the question we ask as an administrative team is, are our schools able to function and operate for in-person learning? And the answer has been yes to date. I can tell you that we have regular conversations. As a school, we function under the authority and within the guide rails of the Vermont Department of Health. So I think it's, if I were to have a conversation, I would want to have the Vermont Department of Health as part of that conversation. I don't think we can do that, but I think these are questions that are also important. We had a conversation, myself, principals here, nurse, and our school district nurse COVID coordinator, and we feel very confident in the advice we get currently from the Department of Health. There's going to be differences of opinion on what responses should be. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a medical professional. I'm an educator, and that's what we're focused on this year. At the same time, we are in constant communication. This has been my life for the last 2.5 years. I feel very confident in the professional team we have in place. So I would have to, what I would ask the board to have conversation among yourselves is, what is the authority of a school board and a school district in implementing COVID mitigation strategies absent state guidance from the Department of Health? I can also tell you I've had conversations as late as last week with Secretary French. I had a personal conversation with Dr. Levine from the Department of Health, and they are monitoring. They're continuing to work. I was told last week by Secretary French that we can expect further clarification document. They're taking currently the CDC recommendations with their current strategies, and they're going to give schools additional guidance in relation to that, because I think everyone's concerned about this trifecta of illnesses. So I think they're important questions. The administration and school nurses are very confident in the current direction. Yes, we know there's going to be concerns. We, from experience, also know that things happen very quickly, and we get advice from medical doctors. I can tell you from discussing this question with my predecessor, Superintendent Neese, as well as Allison Conyers and others who worked on the strategy here. It was very similar to what I saw in my previous district, where we get guidance. We work very effectively, very efficiently, very quickly to take that on the ground guidance and implement it in action and put that into effect. So at this point in time, as an administrative staff, we feel very confident in the direction. We're happy to provide information to the board, but I would caution the board that, again, we function within the guidelines of the Department of Health. So to come up with policies outside of professional medical advice is something that we would want to consider very carefully.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, so like you weren't on the board yet then, but back when COVID hit, and there was I think we talked about this privately, but there was a moment basically where the school board had to say, okay, we're going to be the ones that are setting policy about COVID, or we're going to delegate that to the administration, and we delegated that to the administration. So I think there is some kind of limitations as far as what we can as a school board do. One thing that I do think is fair and totally reasonable is to ask the administration to give us a plan for what would happen when surges do take place in our school community. And maybe you guys already have that, I don't know. And that seems like something as a school board member I could really support, and I would think would be a really important thing to have, because we've been through the beginning of a pandemic now, and we have learned a lot, and coming up with a plan isn't reinventing the wheel. We've done a lot of the things that we would probably do again, and it's important to have that in place and have the community know that we have a plan in place. So that's where I think that I really I'm glad you brought this up, and think that we have some work to do there probably.
Thank you. And again, this motion doesn't presuppose what we would figure out. I think it's important that the discussions are evidence-based. And I disagree that we're not able to look at evidence. I'm not sure if this is your claim, Mike, but the idea that we're not epidemiologists, I don't think discounts us from being able to think through what kind of structures to put in place to give some guardrails around this. I think that when that first, and I couldn't find it in policy, so I'm not sure what that looked like when the board said, okay, superintendents, you handle this. It was early in the pandemic when things were very different. It was moving super quick and our state was on the ball. So that's very different than now, where the last thing, if you look at that timeline, the last thing that happened was in March, masks were dropped. And then since then, we've had the most cases in that school year in our district. We've had BA2 peak, we had a huge surge, and now we're into this weird plateau where stuff is just circulating. So not much has been happening in terms of regulations, policies, or guidance from the state. And I guess the point of my op-ed as well was to say that we can't just sit back and trust the state government to be on the ball around this. We as a community are more flexible, and we should be able to look at the situation and say, yeah, we want to have a plan in place. We don't want to just be sitting ducks. And so, considering that, yes, there's state guidelines, they're recommendations, they're not requirements. There are maybe some requirements, and of course we have to factor those in. There's also federal guidelines, again, recommendations. So kind of like just taking it all into account and having a conversation and say, like, what do we want to do? What makes sense for us as a community? And I just say that this is, to me, part of taking an equity approach, is that there's a certain amount of criticality that comes with it, where you don't just look to authorities and say, yeah, whatever you say, I trust you. You have to go into it saying, okay, but hold on, what are the unintended consequences of what you're doing or not doing? And a slide like the one where we look at the ebbs and flows and we see all the protections being taken away, we could think about why that might be. I think it's because it's privileging capitalism and our economy and trying to tell everybody, don't talk about this. We know you're tired of talking about this. Just go on and go make money for rich people. That's what I think it is, and giving us permission because, yeah, we don't want to talk about it. But we're on a board where we're leaders in our community, and we have to be able to say, well, if nobody wants to talk about this, we have to, as unpleasant as it is, and we have to say, from an equity standpoint, what is going on here? Who is this impacting? Who is this impacting the worst? I've heard some people say, if people don't like it, they wear masks. One-way masking is not as effective as two-way masking. If people don't like it, they should homeschool. They should send their kids to a different state. Not everybody can do that, right? So again, from an equity standpoint, like, we have to think about, there's people who don't have the time to be at this meeting right now. They're just trying to like go paycheck to paycheck. And we as decision makers have to say what is best for our community. So I think it at least warrants a conversation, evidence-based one, and not just dismissing it by saying, trust the quote unquote experts.
You had asked me, I absolutely think this is a conversation the board can certainly have if it chooses to. My only caution was that we're a public school, not a private school, so there are other laws that we operate within. We can't designate we can't designate the common cold as an infectious disease. That's a responsibility and a function of the state. Likewise, we have been told we may not contact trace. And that is, again, a legal function that we have to have authority to do things like contact tracing. I think the school district did a good job of operating within the boundaries of the advice that the state gave us last year, gave me in Pennsylvania. But we had some flexibility. The state said we could drop the mask requirement shortly after the end of winter break. This school district, I think, wisely chose to extend that to March 14th. But I would also point out March 14th was a strategic date because that's the date that the state withdrew all their COVID guidance. So the school district chose and the team chose not to extend that because that was within the authority given to it. So I would just caution that developing policy is a very I think conversations are good. I think developing policies outside of guidance from the public health experts and the medical experts for educational institution is on shaky ground.
I just have a general question, really. Are you aware of, are there schools in Vermont that have adopted a type of policy where they effectively have like an on and off switch for when masking is required? Like they could choose times, I think you understand. Yeah.
Public schools, no, because we operate under the jurisdiction of the Department of Health. So that's a function of the, again, that's a function of our public health experts.
Yeah, okay.
Can I add to that? Last year we did. So there was at least one district, I think maybe multiple, who did base it on the CDC guidelines and said, we're going to do on and off based on the levels that the CDC are designating per county. And at some point, the Department of Education made a public statement that said, you shouldn't be doing that because we told you no masks. So, and they're not doing it this year. And that was a big district, is Montpelier. Yeah.
Any other, I want to make sure nobody on Zoom. Kelly, did you want to go ahead?
I guess I feel like we might get into a big predicament if we overstep at this point, is where I'm leaning. And I'm also wondering if we're still using up COVID dollars and stuff like that, could that potentially be taken away from us if we are instating new policies? And I mean, this isn't around maybe making policy, but maybe around making the discussion. I concur with what Lisa was saying, that we did not want to take this on as a board, and I'm still right there. And I think our administration is doing a great job with the tools that they have and the information that they know. And I would say, yeah, come up with a procedure or come up with a plan in case infection rises to whatever degree. But I don't know. I'm Cindy and then Mike.
Is anybody on this opportunity? Oh, okay. Cindy and then Mike.
I don't think as a board that I would be thinking that we should be in a position of doing policy or anything. I think the most thing that as a board we do is do policy, and then the administration does the procedures that kind of need to be consistent with whatever our policy is. But I do think it's important for us as a board to be on top of this particular issue, and to be on top of it. I think we need to be intentional about having it on our agenda and being in a position to talk about it, and being in a position to, so when someone says to me in my community, well, what do we do? What's going on about COVID anyway? What is this? You know, and I'm in a position right now where I'm not completely sure. No, we do not require masking. That's because the Department of Education told us we couldn't. I mean, I can learn those kinds of things from you and from the school nurses, from Alice and whoever. And I can let my community know that I am trying to keep on top of it and that we're trying to talk about it. And we do think it's an important issue. I think it's part of our let's look at our communication piece on our goals. I just think it's an important communication, and I think that's all. That's what I think.
Yes. I think we're getting a little off the train tracks here. I thought this was a discussion about having a discussion. And I think, no. And it's not you. I think it's easy to do. With respect to what Life, I think, is asking for, I think, is that his request is to have a discussion about, and Kelly, or whoever's running the thing to put up the motion, but it's to talk about respiratory illnesses and what our school district is doing. But it will include a talk of the coronavirus. And I just think that this particular conversation might be more in depth right now that we're having. And no. And I'm for having this conversation at another time. Perhaps it's not, perhaps it's I guess I'm still a little unclear of what the presentation would be or whatever at the future, but a discussion by the board of what we're looking for, perhaps for information from the school, the superintendent's office or whatever about what's going on in the school district. And that's all, I guess that's all I have to say. I think if we keep talking, it's just going to turn into the discussion.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and vote? Do you feel good about going ahead and voting? Okay. Ashley. Or do you want me to come back to you, Ashley? Okay. Bobby.
Yes.
She said yes. Christina's not. She had to leave. Cindy. Jonathan.
Yes.
Lisa. Marlena.
Yes.
Life. I don't think we're on the same mic anymore.
Okay. Yes.
You voted yes. Tori. Kim is not here. Kelly. Mike. Ashley. And no, correct. Okay, and what is that? I think it's, so that will pass. Okay. So that will go on a future, near future agenda. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that we had pulled out of the consent agenda and we had done, it was in your board packet, was the nurse leader job description. So I would be looking for a motion to approve the nurse leader job description and then we can have discussion. Okay. We're just getting tally sheets ready. Any adults dressing up for Halloween? Anybody? Tori, what are you going to be? Okay, so Tori is going down to New Orleans. She and her family are all going to dress up as Toy Story characters and they're going to go trick-or-treating in New Orleans. Come on, anybody else? Any adults dressing up for Halloween? No, okay. Jake, what are you going to be? Yeah, you are an adult. Okay, Jake's going to be a crocodile. Which Toy Story character are you going to be?
Depending upon the weather, it will be Jessie or one of the aliens.
Okay, so Tori's going to be either Jessie or one of the aliens that gets by the claw. Yeah, okay. Kelly's working. No, I'm not dressing up. I'm not. I do decorate. I do decorate my entire house though outside. Yes, she has seen that. It's my favorite holiday. Okay, maybe. And we get no trick-or-treaters either. We get 0 trick-or-treaters. So I know. I remember those first few years when we bought our house, I bought candy because I had to work as a nurse on Halloween. And my husband was all excited and no trick-or-treaters, none. We're working on the tally sheet, guys. It'll be just one second. Yeah, so he made the who made did anybody make the motion? So Tori did. Is there a second? Okay, second. So then we'll just bring up the wording. So the nurse, where did I print that out? So What I know about it, and I know that Mike will be able to chime in, is that the previous superintendent, so Superintendent Neese, had applied for some grant money for a nurse. And then I guess we were wanted or approved of it or whatever, got the money. So this is a job description for that position. And as we said in our leadership report, that it's not a guarantee to carry over to the next year. So with that being said, Mike maybe can add a little bit more details to it. Oh, microphone.
Sorry about that. I just had a couple rapid fire quick questions here.
I have three.
My question is, so I'll just give you a couple of rapid fire and you can kind of answer them all at once, I guess,
Sure.
is do you support this position? Have you talked to the nurses currently and do they support this position? And if we weren't to accept the grant, I believe this is a grant, is there ramifications? I know sometimes when you don't accept the grant, you apply for it, then you're like suspended for a couple of years before you can apply again.
Right. Previous superintendent discussed this or made mention to the board that we were applying. And when you apply, you agree that you'll accept the grant. We accepted the grant for $79,000. It was, so the question, have I had conversations? I've had continual conversations with our nurses. They have taken leadership in this. It was their idea to apply for it. Part of it was born out of COVID and their desire to do more leadership in that area, but also to provide professional leadership in other areas, and to have somebody designated to be the lead person among the nurses. So this is a grant funded position. It's 0.6. So we would employ a substitute for 3 days of the 5 days of the week for the person who would be hired for that. That would free them to do the planning, the leadership. COVID would be a factor of that. Other illnesses, but also professional development, because we're an educational institution. So our professional development is geared towards our teachers and the educational realm, and our nurses seek other kinds of training outside of our professional development. So that would be part of that as well. They are aware that it is just a 1 year with no guarantee for further. Their goal would be to see that this would be an important part of our health education for our school district and also our support of our school nurses. So they would like to see that go further, but they are willing to test this out and see how this would go on a pilot basis. We've had conversation with Harwood Union Education Association about this. I've had conversation with them. The nurses have a conversation. So it's with the full support of the administration, our school nursing team, and we are working on, there's some elements of the job description that require a side letter with the association, and we're working on that as well.
Did I understand you correctly that this wouldn't be a new hire? This would be somebody being kind of promoted into the position temporarily?
It would be an internal posting. So we would look to have someone internally fill that position.
But then that person's position would be a new hire. This is not a nursing position in a school. This is one of the schools, this position.
It would be a 0.6 position. So the person would spend 3 of the 5 days of a week on their responsibilities, and we would employ a substitute to fill the nurse's office for those 3 days. They'd be available if there was some kind of crisis.
So it sounded like the union hasn't signed off on this yet. And I don't know if that's usual, like if we're creating a new position, if we usually want that, or if we should have a contingency that says, is assuming that there's a agreement around the side letter, or just any guidance on that?
They're supportive of the position in the job description. There just it may need to be some elements. We have to have further discussion, some elements that require just clarification of some contract language, but nothing that would hold up the board's approval, and nothing that we would need to add as an amendment to thanks.
So, okay, and then just so this could actually be, you could see this person eventually maybe even being the liaison to the board or to give regular updates if we needed a nurse representative to come to the board.
Absolutely. I think it would be the perfect person to have some interface with the board on topics of school health in general.
The substitute that would be hired, would that be a nurse substitute or would it just be somebody filling in?
Nurse, someone with nurse training, whether it's RN, LPN.
Anybody on Zoom have any questions? I want to make sure I didn't miss you guys. Okay. Okay, feel ready to vote? No, it's okay. We're just. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's okay.
Merges myself.
This is more than the job description, right? We're approving job description and hiring? No.
Just the job description.
Okay, so that motion looks good for everybody, that first and second. Okay, so is there any objection to approving the nurse leader job description? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any, that will pass. Oh, yeah, that'll pass. We're okay. One quick thing before we go into the consent agenda, there is an important, I meant to bring up earlier, I'm going to apologize. There is an important Duxbury meeting happening November 16th that we have a board meeting the same evening. We just want to make sure that we could have a quorum so that Life and Cindy, I think Mike was going to attend, he's going to attend part of the school board meeting, would be able to attend that. So if you foresee and you're not going to be able to attend the November 16th meeting, please just let me know as soon as possible so that we want to make sure we have a quorum. Just, you don't have to do it right this second, but if you foresee that happening, just let me know as soon as possible. Go Life.
Is there any precedent for changing a board meeting? I mean, this is just weird that we have these two big community things conflicting, and I'll ask the same thing of Duxbury, but
no, we have only 2 board meetings planned. It's January that we potentially have 3. I don't know the procedures on changing it. It was already laid out for the agenda, and it is a tight timeline in November because they're actually back-to-back meetings because of the Thanksgiving break. So go ahead, Cindy.
If there's some things on the agenda that you know would need a full quorum to get, like the consent agenda and the consent thing that we're about to do, whatever, if I'd be willing to come here at 6 and then just go up to the Duxbury meeting at 7. That meeting's not till 7. If we could have essential voting items in that first hour, I would be glad to be here and then go to that one.
well, just noticing the scheduling, it looks like we have back-to-back on 9th and 16th and then off for the holiday week. And the next meeting is December 7th. So potentially you could do November 30th and the 7th, and you'd still end up with a back-to-back and have 2 in November, but I get it. I mean, this is probably on the calendar before the Duxbury one, so I'm still confused about this.
It's my understanding that.
Oh, the same thing happened in Waitsfield? Yeah.
It's my understanding that, and I get what you're saying, Life, but you have to set your meetings in after town meeting for when your school board is meeting. You can have special meetings, of course, but just because they're warned for public, and that's when the school board decided, I guess, I'm assuming you guys had a reorganization meeting in March. Yeah.
We did. And then at some point after that, we looked at the calendar and along with the school calendar and had a discussion about setting the dates. So we can have an update to the board at the next meeting. If we feel like there is some pressing things with action items, like, for example, I think we on that meeting, that agenda, then maybe we can potentially move some of those ahead of, go ahead, Lisa. Like maybe, I mean, maybe we can flip the agenda around a little bit. I don't know, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think you also could entertain the idea of moving it up if need be, like it could be 5, start at 5, so there's 2 hours cushion if that needs to happen.
We could have a discussion about this at the next meeting on the 9th if we feel a need to. So anyway, I'm just, go ahead. Do you know, you feel, you can jump in, it's okay. Okay. Out there. Okay, so the next thing is going to be the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ashley, second. Mike. What time is it? Is there, so the consent agenda is going to include everything, but we pulled out the nurse leader job. So is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any, that will pass. We have our board recap. Lisa, it's supposed to be you and Kim, but Kim could not be here tonight, so I can look at it. Yeah. Unless somebody else wants to jump in and be the editor. Guys, don't throw your hands up already. Okay. Okay, so that's, what? Well, no, yeah, if nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it. That's totally fine. Okay, Life will do it. Okay, we'll put down Life. Perfect. Okay, so I don't think there's anything extra to add to communications. No. Okay. If there's nothing else, I'd be looking for a motion to get action. Okay.
To adjourn.
Sounds good. See you guys in 2 weeks. Happy Halloween.